Hi guys, and welcome to Boring History Story Relaxing. Tonight we roll westward inside a covered wagon in the year 1852 while snow begins to erase the Great Plains one pale breath at a time. The sky lowers like a grey wool blanket. The wind slips icy fingers under the canvas, and every creak of the wheels sounds a little more tired than the last. You probably won't survive this with your dignity intact, at the very least. Because even finding a dry corner to sleep in is about to become a heroic achievement, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and as always, tell us where you're watching from, and what time it is there, because somewhere in the world, someone is cozy while you're mentally freezing beside an ox team. Now, dim the lights. You settle deeper into the slow, swaying misery of the trail, where the evening comes early and the snow does not ask permission. The wagon groans beneath you. It is not a grand pioneer palace, no matter what later paintings may suggest. It is a wooden box on wheels, usually about 10 feet long and 4 feet wide, with bows of bent wood rising overhead to hold a canvas cover. That canvas, treated with oil or paint if the family's been careful, is meant to shed rain, sun, and dust. Snow is another guest entirely. Snow presses, snow clings, snow melts just enough to make everything damp, then freezes again as if it has a personal grudge against comfort. You're crossing the Great Plains in late season, which is already poor planning, though sometimes life does not arrange itself politely around weather. Maybe the river crossings delayed you. Maybe sickness slowed the company. Maybe a wheel broke in mud 2 weeks ago, and now the whole party is paying for it under a sky the colour of cold pewter. The Oregon and California trails saw huge movement in the early 1850s, and 1852 was one of the heaviest years of overland migration, with thousands of emigrants pushing west in long wagon trains. That is the sensible historical fact for tonight. The less sensible emotional fact is that numbers do not keep your toes warm. You sit with your shoulders hunched, knees drawn close, listening to the canvas above you slap and billow. Each gust makes the wagon breathe like some enormous sleeping animal. The smell is close and complicated. Damp wool, old flour, wood smoke clinging to coats, leather harness, tallow, a faint sourness from socks that have not known privacy in a regrettable number of days. If you were hoping for crisp alpine freshness, welcome to history, where the past often smells like wet livestock and endurance. Outside, the prairie is disappearing. Only an hour ago, you could still see brown grass bending under the wind, dry stalks rattling like tiny bones. Now snow gathers in the wheel ruts and clings to the spokes. The oxen lower their heads and lean into their yokes, steam rising from their nostrils. Their hides darken where snow melts against warmth. The driver calls to them in a tired voice, not loudly now, because sound is swallowed by the weather. Even shouting feels wasteful. The wagon does not glide, it lurches. Every rut sends a hard jolt through the boards, and every jolt reminds you that sleep tonight will be negotiated, not granted. Your bedding is somewhere behind you, wedged between sacks of cornmeal, a rolled quilt, a coffee pot, spare axle grease, and a crate that was packed very confidently back in Missouri by someone who believed in optimism. That person may have been you. We do forgive earlier you, mostly. A covered wagon is not really meant for passengers all day. Many emigrants walk beside it for mile after mile, partly because the ride is punishing and partly because the wagon must carry supplies more than people. But now, as the snow thickens, even walking becomes a slow battle. Your skirts or trousers gather wet at the hem. Your boots suck at the mud beneath the snow. Your hands ache inside mittens that are not as dry as they were this morning, so you climb in when you can, not elegantly, because elegance froze somewhere behind you. Inside, the space is dim, bluish, and crowded. The canvas filters the last light into a dull glow. You can see shapes more than details: a shovel handle, a tin cup swinging from a peg, a blanket roll, a child's face tucked under a shawl, eyes wide but quiet. The storm has a way of making everyone listen inward. Conversation drops into murmurs, even complaints soften. Not because anyone feels cheerful, but because the wind seems to be doing enough complaining for the whole company. A quirky little tidbit: since you're still awake enough to deserve one, some emigrants carried feather beds, rocking chairs, framed pictures, and other household treasures at the start of the journey, only to abandon them along the trail when the load became too heavy. The plains became, in places, a strange museum of surrendered comforts. Imagine a fine chair sitting alone beside a muddy track, looking offended. Tonight, you might think of every abandoned featherbed with a tenderness usually reserved for lost kingdoms. The snow blows sideways now. It taps against the canvas in tiny dry grains, then softer flakes, then hard little pellets again. Weather on the plains changes character quickly. It does not simply arrive, it experiments. The temperature falls with a patience that is almost rude. First your nose cools, then your fingers complain. Then the cold seems to slide under your ribs and sit there, polite but firm, like an unwanted guest who has brought no food. Someone ahead signals that the wagons may need to halt soon, not here, perhaps, not quite yet. The men and older boys scan the land for a place with some slight protection, maybe a draw, a creek bank, a low rise that can blunt the wind. On the open plains, shelter is sometimes only a difference of a few feet, but in a storm those few feet matter. The wagon train stretches in a loose line, each pale cover ghosting through the snow. Wheels turn more slowly, iron rims grind against frozen ground. Harness chains clink with a thin, tired music. You pull a blanket closer around your shoulders and feel the damp at its edge. The wagon's wooden side is cold against your hip. Somewhere under the cargo, a tin plate rattles repeatedly, a small domestic sound that feels absurdly normal. Home used to mean walls, a hearth, perhaps a bed that did not move. Now home is whatever stays upright around you. 4 wheels, canvas, rope. A few people breathing close enough to share warmth. This is the little moving room you have trusted with your life. And tonight it must become a bedroom in a snowstorm. Historians still argue whether emigrants experienced the wagon primarily as a symbol of opportunity or as a daily instrument of exhaustion. And in this moment the debate feels almost funny. Opportunity is somewhere beyond the storm, beyond the mountains, beyond all this cold whiteness pressing at the seams. Exhaustion is right here, sitting beside you, wearing your boots. The light fades further. The horizon vanishes. There is no grand sunset, only the sky losing interest in being visible. Snow gathers along the front edge of the wagon cover and sifts in where the canvas does not sit tight. A few flakes land on your sleeve and remain there, delicate and perfect for one breath before becoming water. You brush them away, then stop, because more come in. History is very committed to realism tonight. A younger child asks whether you will stop soon. Someone answers yes, though no one knows exactly. That is how comfort sometimes works on the trail, not certainty. Just a small word placed gently in the dark. Yes, soon. Warm enough, dry enough. Morning will come. These are not lies exactly. They are little bridges. The wagon dips into a shallow rut, then rises. You steady yourself with one hand against a barrel. Your palm feels the rough wood, the metal hoop, the vibration of movement through every board. The storm presses around you. Yet, inside this narrow shell, life keeps arranging itself. A shawl is tucked around a shoulder. A sack is shifted to make space. Someone checks that the tinderbox is still dry. Someone else mutters that if the flour gets wet, the whole journey will taste like paste and regret. And still the wagon rolls, slower now, toward whatever shelter the plane may offer. You do not sleep yet. You only prepare to become the kind of tired that can sleep through discomfort, through wind, through fear, through the soft hiss of snow against canvas. The night is coming down around the wagon, and you are inside it, breathing damp wool and cold air, waiting for the wheels to stop. The wheels slow until each turn feels uncertain, as if the wagon itself is asking whether the earth beneath it can still be trusted. Snow has thickened into a pale blur, and the line of wagons ahead appears and disappears in drifting curtains. You cannot see far, only the dim shapes of oxen, canvas tops, and people moving like bundled shadows. The whole world has shrunk to the reach of a lantern, and the sound of the wind worrying at every loose rope. Someone calls from ahead, and the word travels backward through the train. Halt! Not cheerful, not dramatic, just necessary. You feel the wagon lurch one final time, then stop with a tired settling of wood, axle and cargo, for a moment. After so many hours of grinding motion, the stillness is almost strange. Your body keeps swaying even though the wagon no longer moves. Your knees remember the road, your shoulders remember bracing, your ears, poor loyal things, keep expecting the wheels to groan again. Outside, people begin making decisions quickly, because darkness is closing and the storm has no respect for group discussion. A campsite must be chosen, and in fine weather that might mean water, grass, level ground, and a bit of comfort. Tonight, comfort has been demoted. Survival is chairing the meeting now. You climb down carefully, boots meeting snow over half-frozen mud. The cold comes up through the soles as if the ground itself has teeth. The wind pushes at your side. It smells of snow, wet leather, ox breath, and the faint mineral dampness of a creek somewhere nearby. The wagon party has found a shallow depression near a low bank. Not much, really, but enough to break the worst of the wind on the Great Plains. A small dip in the land can feel like architecture, not good architecture, or like a basement made by a distracted giant. Still, you take what you're given. The men walk the area with lanterns held low, their light trembling over grass, snow, and wheel ruts. Women and older children look toward the wagons, already thinking of bedding, food, babies, fire, and all the tiny domestic tasks that do not disappear merely because nature has decided to be theatrical. In many wagon companies, labour follows familiar patterns from home, though necessity often blurs them. Everyone who can move has something to do. Even the smallest child can hold a cup, fetch a mitten, or be told not to wander off, which is very important work and rarely appreciated. The wagons are drawn into a rough arrangement, not always the perfect circle imagined in old films. A full defensive circle is not practical every night, and many camps are shaped by terrain, weather, animals, and fatigue. But in a storm, they do try to turn the wagon fronts away from the hardest wind, angle the covers, and place animals where they can be watched. The idea is simple. Give the wind fewer places to bite. Give people fewer steps to take in the dark. Give the night a little structure, because the night is already doing too much. You help guide the rear wheels into place. The driver clicks to the oxen, their hooves sink and slide, chains clatter softly. The wagon shifts, stops, rolls an inch, then holds. Someone wedges a stone behind a wheel, then another. A brake, if the wagon has one, is set with stiff fingers. You can feel how every action takes longer in cold. Buckles resist, ropes stiffen, hands become clumsy, almost wooden. The body has opinions, and most of them are complaints. A mainstream fact settles into this little scene. Emigrant guidebooks and trail advice often warned travellers to start early in the season and keep moving steadily, because late arrivals risk snow in the mountains and severe weather on the plains. Yet real journeys rarely obeyed printed advice. Rivers flooded, livestock strayed, people became ill, wagons broke, babies were born. The trail was not a schedule, it was a negotiation. Tonight, the negotiation is with wind direction. Someone raises a wet finger, which is optimistic, because every finger is wet now. Another man watches the blown snow sweep past the lantern and points toward the darker line of the bank. Wagons begin facing inward or sideways, depending on the patch of ground they occupy. The goal is to create pockets of stiller air, little zones where a fire might live for more than 3 rude seconds. Fire is the next worry. Fuel on the open plains is not always proper wood. In many places, emigrants burn buffalo chips, dried cattle dung, twisted grass, brush, or scraps carried along for emergencies. Yes, the glamorous West includes cooking over dried manure. History does enjoy humbling anyone who romanticizes it too hard, in dry weather. Buffalo chips can burn surprisingly well. In a snowstorm, however, anything fuel-like must be protected, coaxed, and praised as if it is a nervous royal infant. A quirky tidbit drifts in with the smoke that is not yet smoke, some travellers wrote, with amused disgust about learning to value buffalo chips, even selecting the driest ones like seasoned shoppers choosing fruit at a market. Imagine crossing a continent and developing strong opinions about the texture of old bison droppings. Humans adapt. We adapt in deeply undignified ways. You bend near the wagon, helping pull down a small bundle of kindling wrapped in cloth. It has been tucked under sacks and guarded like treasure. A tin lantern swings above you, its flame shivering behind cloudy glass. The storm makes every light seem fragile. A lantern is no longer an object. It is a promise. Stay lit, little friend. We have extremely low standards tonight. Near the creek bank, the ground is uneven but less exposed. Snow piles against the rise, forming curved lips along the grass. The party avoids camping too close to the water, because banks can crumble, ice can hide holes, and waking in a frozen creek is not part of anyone's bedtime routine. They also avoid the most open flat, where wind would roar unobstructed through the wagons. So this awkward middle place becomes home, not perfect, not safe, exactly, just safer. Historians still debate how often emigrant camps followed formal rules compared with improvised judgment, and tonight you feel why the question matters. A captain may give orders, but the land has the final edit. The printed plan says one thing, the snow says another. The oxen add their own suggestions by refusing to stand where the footing is bad. The youngest child adds a small sob into a shawl, which is also information, though harder to map. You carry an armload of bedding toward the lee side of the wagon, then think better of it and push it back inside. Too damp, too windy. Every object taken out becomes something the storm can claim. A quilt dropped in snow is no longer bedding. It is a future argument, so supplies are moved carefully, one at a time. Between gloved hands, a kettle, a skillet, a tin cup, a sack of meal. The coffee, thank mercy, is found dry. Around you, other wagons settle. The camp begins to sound less like travel and more like endurance. Hooves stamp, ropes snap tight. Adults murmur instructions. A baby coughs, then quiets. The wind slides over the canvas covers with a long, hollow rushing, almost like surf. If the ocean were made of needles and poor decisions, the first fire attempt fails. A spark catches, glows red in tinder, Then the gust steals it. Someone shields the little nest with a hat. Someone else kneels with their body blocking the wind. Another person holds a blanket as a screen, though everyone knows that blanket must not catch, because that would be a very energetic new problem. On the second try, a thin flame lifts, bends sideways, and clings to a twist of dry grass. You watch every face lean toward it. The flame is tiny, ridiculous, and important. Soon it is fed with chips, twigs, and splinters shaved from a broken packing slat. The smoke smells sharp, earthy, and damp. It refuses to rise neatly, because the wind keeps pressing it flat and sending it into eyes. People cough. Someone laughs once, quietly, at the unfairness of it. You feel warmth on one cheek and snow on the other, which is perhaps the most honest description of the evening. The campsite is not really chosen once. It's chosen again and again with every adjustment. Move that wagon 2 feet, tie the canvas tighter, pull the animals closer, dig a shallow trench where meltwater may run, keep the food off the ground, set the bucket where it will not freeze solid by morning, though it may do so anyway because buckets have their own plans. Above all, you begin to understand that stopping is not rest. Stopping is the beginning of another kind of work. The trail has merely changed costumes. It is no longer miles under wheels. It is ropes, fires, bedding, animals, snow, and the difficult art of making a place where sleep might dare to approach. You look back at the wagon. Its canvas top glows faintly in lantern light. Its ribs curved against the storm like the bones of a small, stubborn creature. Inside, there will be crowding, dampness, hard boards, and the smell of everything you own. Outside, there is wind enough to scour thought from your head, so you choose the wagon, as anyone sensible would, and begin preparing this cramped wooden box to become a bedroom. You climb back into the wagon with the care of someone entering a very small attic during an argument with the weather. One boot finds the wheel hub, one hand grips the sideboard, and for a breath you hover between storm and shelter. Neither place especially welcoming. Then you tumble in with only mild disgrace, which is a respectable achievement for 1852. Inside, the wagon is dimmer now. The lantern outside throws a trembling amber patch across the canvas, but most of the interior is shadow. The air feels close, warmer than the open wind, yet wet with trapped breath and damp cloth. Snow whispers against the cover every now and then. A gust pushes the canvas inward so it bows above your head, as if the night itself is leaning down to inspect your arrangements. This is the moment when a freight vehicle must become a bedroom. It is not natural. The wagon was packed for motion, not sleep. Barrels, sacks, tools, bedding, clothing bundles, spare parts, food stores, cooking gear, and sentimental items all compete for the same narrow space. You quickly learn that a covered wagon is less like a room and more like a puzzle that resents being solved. You begin with the heaviest things. Flour sacks are shoved toward the front, not too near the opening where snow might drift in. A bag of beans goes beside them. A small chest is turned sideways and wedged against a crate so it will not slide in the night. The coffee pot is moved, because if someone kicks it over in the dark, civilization may collapse by breakfast. The skillet is wrapped in cloth to stop its handle from knocking against the boards. Every rattle seems louder in a storm, and sleep will already have enough enemies. A mainstream historical fact rests under all this rearranging. Most emigrant wagons were smaller and lighter than the huge Conestoga wagons used for freight in the East. Families crossing the plains often used farm wagons or modified prairie schooners, built to carry supplies over long distances without exhausting the animals too quickly. That means less room for you, less room for everyone, less room for the fantasy of stretching your legs like a person in a hotel bed, which is adorable and entirely unavailable. You unroll bedding over the flattest area you can make. First comes a ground cloth or canvas sheet if you have one, because cold climbs through boards with patient enthusiasm, then quilts, blankets, maybe a feather tick if your family has managed to keep one. Feather beds are wonderful until they become damp, then they behave like luxurious sponges with opinions. Straw mattresses, buffalo robes, and folded clothing may also be pressed into service. Comfort is assembled from whatever has not frozen, leaked, torn, or been traded away. The wagon bed beneath you is hard, ridged, and uneven. You feel the line where one board sits higher than the next. You feel a nail head through 2 layers of blanket and make a private note to hate it later. A child is assigned the warmest corner. An older person gets the place farthest from the opening. Someone with a cough is tucked where the draught is less sharp, though there is only so much tucking can do when the whole room is made of canvas and optimism. The canvas cover is checked from within. You run your hand along the seam where the fabric is tied to the wagon bows. It is cold and gritty with blown snow in fair weather. The cover gives shade and privacy. Tonight, it is your roof, your wall, your first argument against the sky. The ties must be tightened. A loose flap can scoop snow all night and dump it on your bedding by morning. That is not a bedtime surprise anyone requested. Someone outside calls for a rope. You pass one through the rear opening, fingers brushing cold air. The opening is then pulled closed as much as possible, with a canvas flap, a blanket, or spare cloth hung to slow the draft. It does not stop the wind entirely. Nothing does, but it changes the wind from a slap into a whisper, and tonight that counts as luxury. A quirky tidbit curls up here like a cat that somehow survived the trail. Emigrant families sometimes hung pockets, bags, and little fabric organizers from the wagon bows to keep small items within reach. Needles, combs, spoons, spectacles, medicines, letters, and little treasures might hang overhead while the wagon rolled and rocked. So as you prepare to sleep, your ceiling may be decorated not with stars, but with socks, pouches, a tin cup, and perhaps a dangling onion. Interior design. Frontier edition. You tuck smaller objects into corners. The tinderbox must stay dry. Matches, if you have them, are precious and not always reliable. Many families still depend on flint, steel, or carefully guarded embers. A wet tinderbox is the sort of disaster that arrives quietly and then ruins an entire morning. You place it high, wrapped, away from boots. The Bible or family papers go into a chest or cloth bundle. A letter from home is flattened beneath clothing. You may not read it tonight, but knowing where it is matters. Historians still discuss whether wagons functioned more as mobile households or as stripped-down survival machines. And as you move a sewing kit away from axle grease, the answer seems to be both. A home, after all, is not only walls, it is where the useful things are kept, where children are hushed, where food is guarded, where private grief is folded into a blanket and set beside the flower. But this home has wheels, leaks, and an alarming tendency to tip when roads become ambitious. Outside, supper begins to happen in the awkward light of the fire. Inside, you continue making the sleeping space. Wet outer garments must go somewhere. The problem is that there is no somewhere. A damp coat hung from a bow drips onto a sack. A damp coat worn to bed chills the body. A damp coat left outside freezes stiff enough to stand up and begin a new life. So you compromise. You shake snow from it, hang it where it might dry a little in body heat, and silently accept that it will smell like smoke, wool, and resignation. Boots are another question. Taking them off feels heavenly for 6 seconds, then dangerous. Feet swell. Leather stiffens. If boots freeze overnight, getting them on at dawn becomes a small frontier tragedy. Many travellers sleep with boots near them, sometimes wrapped or tucked under bedding to keep them from freezing solid. You loosen yours, but you do not send them far. This is not a modern bedroom where slippers wait kindly by the bed. This is a place where footwear is part of survival. And survival has terrible bedside manners. The wagon shifts slightly as someone else climbs in. Weight changes everything. A crate creaks. A spoon slides and is caught. Bedding is rearranged again, because one body makes a plan and two bodies make a treaty. By the time 3 or 4 people are inside, every inch has a role. Knees must bend. Elbows must be negotiated. A child's head rests near someone's hip. Someone's feet point toward the flower. Your shoulder presses against a bundle of clothing that is pretending to be a pillow. There may be no room for everyone to sleep in the wagon. Some members of the party may sleep beneath it, beside it, in tents, under lean-tos, or near the fire when the weather allows. But tonight, with snow needling sideways. The wagon draws people in like a cramped little ark. If space runs out, people make layers of arrangement. Younger ones curl crosswise. Adults sit half reclined. Someone sleeps sitting up, chin on chest, wrapped in a shawl. The human body's very creative when disappointed. You notice the sound of the storm changes from inside. Outside, it roars. Inside, it becomes texture. A hush across canvas, a tap of sleet, a low wooden moan when the frame flexes. The ropes hum faintly. The cover snaps once, then settles. The wagon has its own nighttime language, and you are learning it because ignoring it is impossible. You smooth the blanket beneath you. It is not dry, not exactly, but it is yours. Its wool scratches your wrist. Its weight presses your legs. The smell of smoke drifts in from the fire, mixed with cold air and the faint sweetness of stored grain. You imagine, for one tender moment, a real bed back east, with a mattress that does not contain hidden spoons, no onions overhead, no snow creeping through seams. Then the wagon creaks, the wind sighs, and someone hands you a cup to take outside for supper. The bedroom is almost ready, not comfortable, not graceful, but ready enough. The canvas has been tied, the bedding spread, the cargo subdued. The wagon has changed from a rattling box of supplies into the smallest possible shelter for tired bodies. Soon, once the food is eaten and the fire fades, you will crawl into this crowded pocket of warmth and pretend the plains outside are not endless. You return from the edge of the fire with supper still ahead of you. But already the question of sleep has become a question of clothing, not night clothes, not soft cotton pajamas. Please set that cheerful modern thought gently aside. You are not slipping into anything called sleepwear unless the phrase means every garment you have not yet lost, soaked, burned, torn, or traded for bacon. Inside the wagon, you begin the slow ritual of deciding what stays on your body. The answer is almost everything. Your outer coat is damp along the shoulders. Snow has melted into the seams and stiffened near the cuffs. You shake it once near the wagon opening, and a spray of white flecks vanishes into the dark. Then you pull it close again because the air bites immediately through the layers beneath. The cold is not just around you now, it is personal. It finds wrists, necks, ears, the small gap between mitten and sleeve. It has excellent attention to detail. Beneath the coat you wear wool, if you're fortunate, and linen or cotton beneath that. Wool is the heroic fabric of this miserable little evening, because it keeps some warmth even when damp. Linen feels cold once wet, and cotton can cling unpleasantly against the skin. But people do not always own ideal clothing. They own what they brought, what they made, what they patched, and what still fits after weeks of walking. The trail is not a catalogue. It is a very long complaint with wheels. Your shirt or chemise has absorbed the day, smoke, sweat, dust now turn into mud, and the sour breath of wet wool all gather in the cloth. You would love to change. You may even have a cleaner garment folded somewhere in the trunk, but undressing in freezing air is a bargain with consequences. Every button undone is an invitation. Every exposed inch of skin feels like a door left open in January. So you loosen only what you must, a collar, a waist tie, perhaps the top buttons at the throat, then quickly back again because the draft finds the opening with insulting speed. Your hands are clumsy, fingers are swollen from cold, and mittens make delicate work nearly comic. Buttons seem smaller in winter, pins become clever enemies. Laces knot themselves with the confidence of creatures who know you cannot feel your fingertips. People travelling overland in the mid-19th century usually wore layered, practical clothing made from wool, linen, cotton, leather and homespun fabrics, with repairs made constantly along the way. Women's dresses, petticoats, shawls, stockings, and bonnets were not costumes to them, but everyday equipment. Men's shirts, waistcoats, trousers, coats, hats, and boots worked the same way. Clothing protected skin from sun, wind, insects, dust, and cold. Tonight, it must also become bedding. You pull a shawl over your head and ears. It smells faintly of smoke and milk. Perhaps from a child earlier. Perhaps from a spill you're choosing not to remember. The fabric scratches your cheek, but the scratch is warm, and warmth excuses many things. A scarf is wrapped again at the throat, if you have a knitted cap. You wear it inside the wagon, because heat slips from the head, and because no one here is hosting a fashion review. If you do not have a cap, you use a shawl, a cloth, or whatever can be tied without strangling you in your sleep. Practical elegance. Very rustic, very desperate. One odd little trail detail is that people sometimes wrapped newspapers, extra cloth, or even pieces of old sacks inside clothing or around feet for added insulation. Paper can trap air, and air, when held still, becomes a thin servant of warmth. Imagine crinkling softly with every movement like a human parcel. Not glamorous, but then neither is freezing politely. Your feet need special care. They have walked beside the wagon for hours, perhaps all day, through mud, ruts, and crusted snow. They throb now. You ease yourself down and tug at one boot, testing whether removal is wise. The leather resists. It has absorbed water and stiffened. Your stocking underneath may be damp, which is very bad news delivered slowly. Wet feet can become numb, blistered, or worse if the cold settles in long enough. You loosen the boots and slide them off only long enough to rub your toes through the stockings. The relief is immediate and dangerous. Your feet steam faintly in the cold air. Someone tells you not to let the boots freeze. You already know, but being told obvious things is part of group suffering. You wrap the boots in cloth and tuck them under the edge of the bedding where some body heat might keep the leather from hardening into two useless little coffins for your feet. If you have dry stockings, you change into them with the solemn gratitude of a person receiving treasure. Dry stockings are not a small comfort. They are a moral event. You roll the wet pair and hang them near the highest, least damp place you can find. They will not truly dry tonight, but they may become less awful. That is the frontier version of progress. The storm taps the canvas in shifting rhythms, now fine as sand, now soft as feathers. The wagon smells stronger as more damp garments collect inside. Wet wool has a heavy animal scent. Leather gives off a cold, earthy smell. There is also the faint sweetness of stored apples, if your family still has any, and the dusty smell of grain sacks. Your nose learns the room the way a hand learns a familiar face in darkness. Some researchers continue to question how emigrants balanced modesty with necessity during harsh weather, especially in crowded wagons where privacy nearly vanished. Diaries often mention discomfort, illness, and fatigue, but not always the awkwardness of changing clothes beside relatives, strangers, or sleeping children. Silence in the records can mean many things. Perhaps people were discreet. Perhaps they were too tired to care. Perhaps they knew future readers did not need every damp stocking confession. Tonight, modesty survives in small gestures, a blanket held up, a body turned away, a child tucked under a shawl while someone changes a garment. You look at the canvas wall while another person adjusts layers behind you. No one comments much. This storm has simplified manners into kindness and efficiency. Do not stare. Pass the dry cloth. Pretend not to hear the groan when a cold sleeve touches warm skin. Mittens are kept close, gloves, if you have them, maybe stiff and damp. Many people wear homemade mitts, knitted wool, or leather coverings lined with whatever softness can be spared. Hands are always needed, and cold hands are a serious problem. You tuck yours under your arms, then between your knees, then breathe into cupped palms. Your breath warms briefly, then leaves moisture behind. Everything helps. Everything betrays you slightly. You think of the clothing packed at the journey's start. Perhaps there were Sunday garments folded carefully. A finer dress, a better shirt, a waistcoat meant for arrival, not hardship. Some families carried clothing for the new life ahead, but the trail consumed fabric. Hems tore, knees wore thin, socks disappeared into mud, washing, or mystery. Needles and thread were essential tools, not hobbies. A patch meant one more day of use. A darned stocking meant one less patch of skin exposed to misery. You crawl farther into the bedding, still dressed, still layered, still not warm enough. The clothing bunches at your elbows and knees. Your waist feels tight when you curl. Your coat collar presses against your jaw. A shawl slips over one eye. This is not luxurious. It is not even particularly restful. But as the wind hisses over the wagon and the snow builds outside, the weight of all those garments becomes strangely reassuring. You're wrapped in labour, memory, and stubbornness. Every seam was stitched by someone. Every patch says you kept going. A cup of something hot is passed in from the fire, and you close both hands around it before drinking. Heat touches your palms first, then your lips, then your chest. For a moment, beneath wool, shawl, coat, blanket, and smoke, you feel almost human again, not comfortable, exactly, but gathered, held together, ready to face the next small task before sleep, which is supper, if the wind allows it. The cup warms your hands for only a little while before supper claims everyone's attention. Sleep may be the great hope of the evening, but hunger is louder for now, and it has been walking beside you all day in wet boots. The camp settles into that familiar trail rhythm where every person is tired, every task is urgent, and somehow the most important object in the world becomes a blackened kettle. Outside the wagon, the fire struggles like a small orange thought in a white world. You crouch near it, careful not to let the hem of your coat swing too close, because history has already provided enough hazards without adding personal combustion. The flame bends flat whenever the wind moves across the hollow. Sparks lift, vanish, then return as tiny red ghosts in the smoke. The snow falls through the firelight, each flake briefly golden before it lands and becomes part of the darkening ground. Tonight's supper is not impressive. It does not need to be. It only needs to be hot, filling, and possible flour, cornmeal, beans if already softened, bacon if there is any left, dried apples, coffee, tea, or a thin broth made from whatever can be spared. You're not dining. You're negotiating with fatigue using carbohydrates. A very ancient human strategy, really. Many overland travellers relied on staples such as flour, cornmeal, bacon, beans, rice, dried fruit, coffee, sugar, and salt. Because these foods packed well and could survive rough handling, fresh meat, milk, eggs, and vegetables appeared when luck, trade, hunting, or livestock allowed. But on a stormy night like this, the menu shrinks toward the simple and dependable. The body does not demand variety now. It asks for warmth. It asks for salt. It asks with quiet desperation. Why dinner is taking so long? You help scoop snow into the kettle. It looks like abundance, an entire plain of water waiting at your feet. But snow melts down into a disappointing little puddle. A kettle packed full becomes only a few inches of water, and that water must be heated before it is useful. Also, fresh snow can hide grit, grass, ash, or whatever the wind feels inspired to deliver. You pick from the cleaner drift near the wagon side, avoiding the places where boots, hooves, and camp life have already made their opinions known. The kettle goes over the fire, propped on stones and a bit of iron. The snow collapses slowly, sinking with a soft hiss. Steam begins to rise. You lean toward it as if steam alone might feed you. Your face warms while your back freezes. This is the evening's pattern. Front warm, back cold, hands warm, feet cold, hope warm, reality cold, very balanced in its horrible little way. The cook, who may be your mother, your sister, your father, your neighbour, or simply the person who still has enough patience to stir, adds meal to the warming water. The mixture thickens into mush, which is not a glamorous word and not a glamorous food. Yet tonight, as the spoon drags through it, you watch with real interest. Cornmeal mush, johnny cake, hard bread softened in liquid, or flour dumplings can become comfort when the world is trying to freeze your eyelashes. There is bacon too, perhaps just a little. It is sliced thin to stretch the supply, fried in a skillet that is blackened from weeks of use. The smell lifts at once, smoky and fatty, and every head nearby turns with the ancient reverence owed to sizzling pork. Even if there is not enough for everyone to have much, the flavour can season a pot. Grease is precious, calories are precious. A scrap that would be ignored at a modern breakfast becomes a treasure worthy of careful accounting. A curious little food habit from the trail is that some emigrants cherished vinegar, pickles, or dried fruit not merely for taste but because sharp or sweet flavours broke the monotony of flour. Bacon and beans. A single dried apple ring could feel almost festive after days of brown food. Imagine calling a wrinkled slice of apple dessert and meaning it from the bottom of your weary soul. The standards are humble, but sincere. The storm pushes smoke into your eyes. You blink, tear up, and look away. Smoke has no manners. It follows whoever dislikes it most. People shift around the fire in slow circles, trying to find the one impossible position where warmth arrives without smoke, sparks, or a boot sinking into slush. There is no such position. But everyone keeps searching. It is a small nightly ritual, like prayer, except with more coughing. The question of fuel sits underneath every cooking choice. More flame means faster food and warmer hands. More flame also means fewer supplies for later. On parts of the plains, travellers depended on buffalo chips because trees were scarce. When chips were dry, they burned hot enough for cooking, but snow makes gathering them miserable and uncertain. Tonight, any fuel collected before the storm is guarded carefully. No one wants to waste it on a dramatic blaze that looks cheerful for 5 minutes and leaves you with cold mush and regret. Some historians still wonder how often emigrants underreported the emotional strain of food scarcity. especially because many diaries list meals in plain. Matter-of-fact lines: flour running low, bacon spoiled, coffee gone, cattle thin. The words can seem calm on the page, but out here, each missing ingredient has a bodily meaning. Less coffee means colder mornings, less flour means thinner cakes, less salt means food that tastes like punishment. A diary may say simply, bad supper. Your stomach understands the full essay hidden inside those two words. You hold a tin plate close while the mush is served. It lands with a soft, heavy sound, pale and steaming. A strip of bacon or a spoonful of grease is added if fortune smiles. Maybe a few beans, maybe a pinch of salt, maybe nothing more. You eat carefully because the plate is hot and the air is cold, which makes every bite feel oddly separate. Steam touches your nose, the first mouthful burns your tongue slightly. You accept this because warmth is worth a little betrayal. The taste is plain, smoky, salty where the bacon has touched it, grainy at the edges. It settles into you, shoulders lower, breathing slows. Around the fire, conversation comes back in fragments. Someone complains softly about the wind. Someone says the bank is holding the worst of it off. Someone else jokes that the snow has kindly covered the mud, which is like putting a clean sheet over a broken chair. A child asks whether there will be more. The answer depends on the pot, the supplies, and the long road still ahead. Coffee, if made, is thin but deeply valued. The beans may have been ground earlier, or pounded awkwardly, or boiled until the drink becomes strong enough to argue with the weather. Coffee on the trail is often boiled in a pot, grounds and all. Then settle with cold water or simple patience. You sip and taste bitterness, smoke, tin, and comfort. It is not a modern cafe drink with a name longer than a hymn. It is hot, dark, and loyal. That is enough. The snow thickens beyond the firelight. The wagons are hulking pale shapes, their canvas tops glowing faintly like sleeping animals under frost. Now and then someone rises to check a rope, shift a pan, or feed the flames. Supper is eaten standing, crouching, or perched on wagon tongues and boxes. No table, no chairs unless someone has foolishly preserved one this far. And if they have, everyone has opinions about its usefulness. Plates are scraped clean because waste is almost indecent here. When the kettle is emptied, more snow may be melted for morning, but only if fuel allows. Water matters through the night. Animals need it. People need it. Cooking needs it. Washing, frankly, can wait. You rub your hands with snow and dry them poorly on a cloth, which is less cleaning than symbolic effort. The spoon is wiped, the skillet is scraped, grease is saved if possible. Even ashes are watched because a living ember might help start breakfast. At last, you carry your cup and plate back toward the wagon, stepping through snow that has already softened the hard edges of camp. The meal has not made you comfortable, but it has made you steadier. Warmth moves outward from your stomach. The wind still claws at your sleeves, yet its sharpness feels slightly farther away. Behind you, the fire lowers and glows. Ahead, the wagon waits, crowded, damp, and almost inviting now, because fullness changes the imagination. You climb in with the taste of smoke and cornmeal still on your tongue, holding the cup against your chest so it will not clatter. Inside, the bedding is ready, the clothing is layered, and the night presses close against the canvas. Supper is finished. Darkness has won the sky. Now the warmth you've made must be shared carefully, body to body, blanket to blanket, as the wagon becomes not just shelter, but a small breathing nest in the storm. You settle back into the wagon with supper warming your middle, and for a few precious breaths the world seems almost manageable. The boards beneath you are still hard, the canvas still trembles, The air is still damp with wool, smoke, and human breath. But food has softened the sharpest edge of the evening, and now everyone begins the quiet work of becoming a pile of people. There is no graceful way to do this. A wagon is a narrow box, and a family is not a set of folding furniture. Bodies have elbows, knees, opinions, and occasionally coughs. You slide into the bedding along one side, curling your legs to make room for someone else's feet. A child is tucked near the middle, where warmth gathers fastest. Another person sits at the opening for a moment, shaking snow from a shawl, then crawls in backward because turning around inside the wagon would require the flexibility of a circus performer and the patience of a saint. The first rule is simple: keep the smallest and weakest warm. Children, the elderly, anyone ill, anyone soaked through. These are drawn inward. Adults become walls. Blankets are not assigned by fairness as much as by need, though fairness is still discussed in low voices because humans can argue about textiles in any century. One quilt is spread across several laps. A robe is tucked over feet. A shawl is folded twice and pressed into a gap where wind sneaks through. Someone's coat becomes a coverlet. Someone's extra skirt becomes a draft stopper. Everything soft is promoted. In wagon trains, families often travelled in close company with relatives, neighbours, or hired hands, and the trail could turn ordinary privacy into a luxury. Sleeping arrangements changed with weather, illness, terrain, and danger. A dry night might allow some people to sleep under the wagon or beside the fire. A storm like this pulls everyone inward, compressing the household until it feels less like a family and more like a carefully packed drawer. You shift your shoulder against a flour sack, which is pretending to be a pillow but is actually a bag of future bread with sharp corners. Another person's knee presses against your thigh. A child's hair tickles your chin. Someone's cold foot, wrapped in stocking and hope, finds your ankle. You flinch, then forgive it. Feet are desperate creatures tonight. Heat comes slowly, at first. Every body brings its own little cloud of cold. Damp coats radiate chill. Boots under bedding are like stones from a creek. The blankets feel cold to the touch until breath and skin begin their quiet work. You listen as everyone settles in layers, exhaling, muttering, adjusting, then adjusting again. The whole wagon rustles like a nest full of tired birds. A small, odd custom from hard travel is the use of warmed stones or bricks, when available, tucked into cloth and placed near feet or bedding. On the plains, stones suitable for warming might not always be easy to find, and fuel is too precious to heat them for long. But when it can be done, a wrapped hot stone is nearly magical. Tonight, you do not have magic. You have an elderly aunt's knees, a damp blanket, and a child breathing into your sleeve. Still, warmth is warmth. The baby, if there is one in the party, is passed from arms to arms until the smallest pocket of comfort is found. Babies do not respect historical drama. They want warmth, milk, dry cloth, and a universe arranged around their immediate preferences. A mother or older sister opens her coat slightly to hold the child close, using body heat as the oldest furnace in the world. The infant quiets, then makes a soft snuffling sound that somehow feels louder than the storm because everyone is listening for it. Illness changes the shape of the night. A cough near your shoulder makes the adults pause. Is it just smoke-cold air? The beginning of something worse on the trail. Respiratory sickness, exhaustion, diarrhea, fever, and injury are constant worries, and winter weather makes every weakness more serious. You hear someone whisper that the child should not breathe the smoky blanket. Another person says the draft will be worse without it. Neither answer is perfect. The past is full of choices between two imperfect things, which is rude but historically accurate. Writers of trail diaries sometimes hint at quarrels inside wagons. but the entries often smooth over the full texture of family tension. Some scholars still question how much emotional conflict was left out because diarists wanted to appear faithful, brave, or proper. You can feel the unwritten moments tonight. The irritated sigh when someone takes too much blanket. The sharp whisper when a boy kicks over a cup. The silence after a husband says the wrong thing about the day's delay. The quick apology that follows, because everyone knows the storm is already punishment enough. Still, tenderness survives. A hand finds another hand under the quilt. Someone rubs warmth into a child's fingers. Someone shifts without complaint to give an older person the better place. You feel another blanket pulled up over your shoulder. Not dramatically, just quietly, as if kindness should not disturb the room. The gesture is small, but inside the dark wagon it feels like architecture. Outside, the animals stamp and snort, the fire pops low, men may still be moving around camp, checking ropes, feed, harness, and the edge of the storm. Inside, those who can sleep begin trying. The wagon cover traps breath until droplets form on the inner canvas. If the temperature falls enough, those droplets may become frost. Later, a bump or gust might sprinkle icy crystals down onto faces and bedding, a charming frontier snow globe. Except you are inside it and nobody asked for decoration. You pull your scarf higher over your chin. Every breath warms the cloth, then dampens it. After a while, damp warmth becomes cold dampness, and you turn the cloth to find a dry patch. There are no perfect solutions, only rotations of discomfort. You tuck your hands under your arms and try to leave your fingers there. Your hips ache from the boards. Your back has discovered a crate corner. Your neck is bent at an angle that will make morning judgmental. Privacy becomes mostly internal. You cannot turn away from everyone, so you turn inward. You think of home, but gently, because too much remembering can make the wagon feel smaller. You think of a bedstead, a hearth, a door that shuts. You think of ordinary winter storms where snow falls outside a house and people complain from inside actual walls. Then you remember the abandoned featherbeds along the trail, those stranded monuments to comfort, and you give them a sleepy little blessing. Someone murmurs a line from a hymn, not a performance, just a thread of sound. Another voice joins for a phrase and fades. The storm presses close, but the voices make a pocket in it. You do not need to be especially pious to understand why songs matter here. Rhythm steadies breathing. Familiar words make the dark less strange. Even a half-remembered verse can become a blanket of its own. The child near your chest asks if morning will be better. You feel everyone hear the question. It hangs in the wagon, soft and heavy. You answer that morning usually explains things. That is not exactly a promise, but it is kinder than describing drifted snow, frozen harness, and breakfast made from stubbornness. The child accepts it because children must accept many adult sentences on faith. The shared warmth finally begins to hold, not evenly. Your feet remain cold, and one shoulder is numb from the boards, but beneath the quilts, shawls, coats, and bodies, a slow heat gathers. The wagon no longer feels like wood and canvas only. It feels alive. Every breath adds to the air. Every heartbeat continues the small collective argument against the storm. You close your eyes. The person beside you shifts, then settles. The baby sighs, somewhere near your knees. Someone snores once and is immediately nudged into silence, which is perhaps the most delicate violence of the night. You almost smile. Outside, the plains stretch white and unseen, but inside the wagon, the world has narrowed to breath, blanket, and borrowed warmth. You're packed too tightly to be comfortable, yet not so tightly that fear can enter easily. The bodies around you are inconvenient, fragrant, restless, and necessary, together. You're warmer than any one of you would be alone. and as the storm combs its fingers over the canvas, you begin to understand that sleep tonight will not come from softness. It will come from closeness. The closeness holds you for a while, not comfortably, but firmly enough that your body begins to surrender. The wagon is dark now except for a faint, dull glow where the last firelight filters through the canvas seam around you. People breathe in uneven rhythms. A child makes a small clicking sound in sleep. Someone's shoulder twitches against yours. The blankets settle with the slow weight of damp wool, and for a moment you think perhaps the night will become simple. Then the wind finds the wagon. It does not arrive as one sound. It comes in layers. First a long sigh across the canvas, smooth and low, like a hand passing over a drum. Then a sharper snap where a loose edge flutters near the rear flap. Then a wooden groan from the wagon frame, deep in the joints, as if the boughs overhead are remembering every mile they have travelled and are not especially grateful. You keep your eyes closed, because opening them will not help. The darkness is already complete, still. The sounds draw pictures whether you invite them or not. The canvas bowing inward becomes, in the mind, a great white animal pressing its face against the shelter. The ropes humming in the gusts become distant voices. The scraping of a branch or frozen weed against the sideboard becomes fingers. History at bedtime is not always soothing in the moment. Sometimes it lies beside you and says, very softly, what was that? The covered wagon is mostly wood, iron, rope and canvas, and every material has a nighttime voice. The iron tire around a wheel pings faintly as cold tightens it. The wooden hubs creak when the wagon shifts in the wind. The canvas cover snaps, relaxes, then snaps again. Pegs, hooks, tools, and tinware tap and swing inside the cramped space, even after you carefully tucked things away. One small cup has escaped discipline and now knocks gently against a post, as persistent as a tiny metal conscience. Travellers on the overland trails often wrote about weather in spare, practical language, noting wind, rain, hail, snow, or cold with the briskness of people too busy to make poetry out of suffering. But severe plain storms could be frighteningly exposed experiences with few natural barriers. Wind swept across miles of open country, driving snow, dust, or rain into camps with tremendous force. That broad openness, so beautiful by daylight, becomes something else after dark. A room with no walls, a sky with no ceiling you can trust. You listen for the animals. Their sounds matter. A restless ox shifts its weight, hooves crunching through crusted snow. A mule blows hard through its nostrils. Harness chains clink, then go still, somewhere beyond the wagon. A man coughs and says something too low to understand. The fire pops once, a small sound nearly swallowed by the weather. You imagine the embers shrinking under ash, each red coal folding inward like a tired eye. The storm changes pitch. Sometimes it roars high overhead, as if passing over the camp without touching it. Sometimes it drops low and slides under the wagon, lifting cold through gaps in the floorboards. You feel it along your back. It creeps between blanket and coat, searching with rude little fingers. You curl tighter. The person beside you shifts closer, and no one complains. In this weather, personal space has been voted out. A strange little belief, carried in various forms by travellers and rural families, is that certain wind sounds could predict a change in weather. A moaning wind might mean worsening cold. A sudden hush might mean snow thickening. A shift in direction might promise clearing or fresh trouble. Whether anyone truly understands the sky tonight is doubtful. But people listen anyway. The human brain prefers signs to helplessness. If the wind must howl, perhaps it can at least provide a forecast. You hear the canvas flap again. It is louder now. A loose tie, a wrinkle catching the gust. Someone near the opening lifts their head. You feel the movement travel through the bedding, one body alerting another without words. There is a pause while everyone listens. The flap slaps once, twice, then stops. A rope outside must have drawn tight, or the wind shifted, or perhaps the wagon simply decided not to shed its roof tonight. Which is kind. The imagination works hardest in darkness. Earlier, in daylight, you could see the plain, the wagons, the animals, the faces of your companions. Now the world is made of noise. Each sound asks to be explained, and the mind supplies explanations with excessive enthusiasm. A scrape might be a loose branch. It might be an animal nosing near the wheel. It might be a wolf. Though wolves generally have better things to do than politely scratch wagon boards for dramatic effect, still, you listen. There were wolves on the plains, along with coyotes, foxes, and many other animals. But emigrant fears often blended real dangers with rumour and exhaustion. A distant howl could become a story by morning. A missing strip of bacon might be blamed on wildlife, a dog, a child, or the mysterious criminal known as Nobody. Tonight. The storm itself makes every creature seem closer. Sound travels strangely through snow. It muffles some noises and sharpens others. The result is a landscape that whispers and startles at random, which is not ideal for relaxation, but very committed to atmosphere. Researchers continue to puzzle over how fear on the trails was shaped by later memory compared with the immediate record of diaries and letters. Some accounts emphasize courage and routine. Others recall terror, loneliness, and dread with sharper color after the fact. Lying here, you can understand both versions in the moment. Fear may be practical. Is the rope secure? Are the animals safe? Will the fire last later? Memory may turn these questions into a grand dark night of the soul. Both can be true. The wagon can be ordinary and frightening at the same time. You shift your cheek against the blanket. The wool smells of smoke and old rain. Your breath warms a small hollow near your mouth, then cools again. A drop of condensation falls from the canvas overhead and lands on your temple. You flinch. It is only water. But in the dark it feels like the sky has reached in with one cold fingertip. Another drop lands somewhere near your shoulder. Someone mutters, "Roof's sweating," and you almost laugh because even the wagon sounds tired. The storm outside presses and releases, presses and releases. The rhythm becomes something like breathing, though not gentle breathing. More like the breath of a giant sleeping badly. You begin to count the gusts without meaning to. One long rush, 3 short snaps, a pause, another rush. Your thoughts drift between worry and weariness. Did anyone secure the spare yoke? Is the flour covered? Are the oxen standing with their backs to the wind? Will morning bring clear sky or deeper drifts? Then the sounds soften for a moment. Not silence. The plains are rarely silent in such weather, but the sharpest edges dull. Snow thickens, perhaps, padding the wagon in white. The canvas no longer snaps so hard. It whispers. The wheel no longer creaks. It rests. The cup gives one final tap and becomes still. Inside the wagon, breathing grows steadier, someone snores lightly and is not nudged this time. The child near you turns over, pulling warmth along with them like a tiny thief. Your foot is still cold, and your hip aches, and the board beneath your ribs has become a personal enemy. Yet the storm's voice begins to blur. The separate sounds melt together into one long hush, filled with faint knocks, sighs, and the low singing of ropes. You're not safe in the way a modern room feels safe. No locked door, no furnace, no glass window with snow politely outside it. You're safe only in the old, fragile sense. The canvas is holding, the wagon is upright, the animals are near, The people beside you are warm, for tonight, that is the whole kingdom. You listen a little longer, because sleep comes slowly when the world is speaking so much. The storm tells its cold story against the cover. The wagon answers in wooden rope. Your body answers by growing heavier, inch by inch, until the sounds no longer need names. They become weather again, just weather, just night, just the great white plains moving around your small shelter while you sink, at last, toward uneasy sleep. Sleep does not hold you for long. It loosens first around the edges, then breaks apart altogether when a low, troubled bellow rolls through the night. You open your eyes into darkness, not truly awake yet, but already listening beside you. Someone shifts. Another person breathes out sharply, the small sound of a body deciding it must rise when it would rather remain buried in blankets until spring. The animals are moving. Outside the wagon, the oxen stamp against the snow. Their hooves crunch, slip, and thud into the half-frozen ground. A mule gives a nervous snort. Harness chains clink with quick, uneven notes. The storm muffles distance, so every sound seems close, as if the whole herd has gathered just beyond the canvas to complain directly into your ear. Honestly, fair enough. They have had a long day, too. You push the blanket down and instantly regret it. Cold pours over you like water. The warmth built by bodies and bedding vanishes from your shoulders, and the air inside the wagon feels raw against your face. Someone near the rear opening is already sitting up, wrapping a scarf around their neck. The animals must be checked. This is not optional. The wagon may be shelter, food chest, bedroom, and rolling household. But without the draft animals, it becomes a stranded box with sentimental contents. Oxen were the preferred draft animals for many emigrant families because they were strong, relatively steady, and able to survive on rougher forage than horses. They were slower, yes, and perhaps less glamorous. But glamour is not pulling your wagon through mud in freezing weather. Oxen also had value at the end of the journey. If they lived that long, that final phrase matters. If they lived that long, on the trail. The animal's body and the family's future are tied together with leather straps, wooden yokes, and daily worry. You reach for your boots beneath the bedding. They are cold but not frozen stiff. Praise every small mercy. You work your feet into them with a grim little wiggle, feeling the damp leather close around your stockings. A shawl goes over your head. Mittens go on. You tuck your coat tight and crawl toward the opening, trying not to step on anyone's hand. A child asks what is happening. Someone murmurs that the cattle are restless. The child turns over because this answer is boring, which is the best possible outcome. The canvas flap opens and the storm breathes directly into the wagon. Snow strikes your face, soft at first, then sharp where the wind drives it. You climb down into the night and land ankle deep in drifted white. The fire has fallen low, only a red glow under ash. The wagons stand around you as pale humps in the darkness, their covers ghostly under a skin of snow. Lanterns move near the animal line, each one making a small golden cave that vanishes a few steps beyond its holder. The oxen stand with their heads low, rumps angled away from the wind as much as ropes allow. Snow has gathered along their backs, their hides steam faintly where body heat meets cold air. One tosses its head and pulls at the yoke, another stamps again, not with drama, but with discomfort. They are tired, hungry, cold, and perhaps frightened by the shifting canvas, the rattling gear, and the strange muffled world around them. You approach slowly. A nervous animal can injure a person without intending to. Hooves, horns, weight, panic. All of these are very persuasive arguments for caution. You speak in a low voice. not because the ox understands the full poetry of your reassurance, but because tone matters, calm travels, so does fear. Tonight you try to be a warm, sensible presence, even if inside your head you're mostly a bundled question mark. Feed is the first concern. Grass under snow is hard to reach, and in a storm animals may waste energy pouring or wandering. Some emigrants carried grain or fodder, but space was limited and feed was heavy. Oxen could graze along the way in good conditions, which was one reason they were practical for long overland journeys. Yet tonight there is nothing easy about grazing. You help shake loose a little hay or dried grass from a protected bundle, not enough to satisfy them fully, but enough to settle them. The animals nose at it eagerly, their breath rising in thick clouds. A peculiar bit of trail life is that some families knew their oxen by name as clearly as they knew their neighbours. Buck, Bright, Berry, Lion, Duke, Star. Names like that appear in diaries and reminiscences, sometimes with real affection. Losing an ox was not like misplacing a tool. It could feel like losing a fellow traveller, one who never asked for Oregon, California, or anyone's dream of a better farm, but pulled toward it anyway. You check the rope where one animal has shifted too close to a wagon wheel. The knot is stiff with ice. Your mittened fingers cannot manage it, so you pull one mitten off with your teeth. The cold bites your bare fingertips immediately. You work quickly, loosening the rope just enough to prevent tangling, then tying it again around a post. The fibers scratch your skin. Snow lands on your knuckles and melts. By the time the knot holds, your fingers ache deeply. A dull pain that seems to reach the bones. All along the line, others are doing the same. A man checks a mule's halter. A woman brings a cloth to rub ice from a horse's nostrils. Someone shifts a blanket over a weaker animal. Though blankets for animals are never simple, because people need them too. The camp's care is divided between human sleep and animal survival, and neither side can be neglected for long. Modern readers sometimes ask whether emigrant parties cared for their animals well enough, and the answer is tangled. Many relied on them intensely and treated them with practical affection. Others overworked teams, misjudged distances, packed too heavily, or pushed animals beyond their strength, because the road and the calendar seemed unforgiving. The record leaves room for discomfort. You can feel that tension tonight as you watch an ox stand trembling slightly in the blown snow. Compassion is present, so is necessity. Necessity is not always kind. The storm snaps at the lantern flame. You shield it with one hand and look toward the outer dark. There is always fear that animals might break loose in whiteout conditions. A wandering ox can disappear quickly, and searching for it risks more people becoming lost or frostbitten. A loose animal might drag harness, injure itself, or panic the rest. So the ropes are checked again. The yokes are examined. The wagon tongues are cleared of drifting snow. A small path is trampled between the wagons and the animal line so no one falls every time they cross, though the storm begins filling it almost as soon as it is made. The animals' bodies are great dark shapes in the lantern glow. You hear chewing now, slow and wet, which is a comforting sound in its own humble way. A feeding animal is a calmer animal. One ox turns its head, and the lantern catches the frost along its lashes. Its eye looks large, patient, and slightly accusing. You cannot argue with it. You're both out here because humans make plans, and weather reviews them harshly. You rub the ox's neck with a mittened hand, feeling coarse hair, damp hide, and solid warmth beneath. The warmth surprises you. In the wagon, heat is hoarded in blankets and breath. Here, this massive animal carries a furnace inside itself. You lean near for half a second longer than necessary, borrowing what comfort you can from the creature that will haul your home tomorrow if morning allows. A distant howl rises beyond the camp, thin and wavering, coyote perhaps, or wolf, or the wind finding a new shape in the low bank. Someone lifts their head. The animals pause, then return to feeding. Fear comes and goes like that, arriving on a sound, leaving when no disaster follows. You let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. The last knot is secure, the feed is covered again. The lantern is turned toward the wagons. Your bare fingers have gone from pain to numbness, which is not an improvement, only a quieter warning. You pull the mitten back on and flex your hand inside it. The movement is clumsy, but feeling returns as a burning tingle. Lovely. Your nerves are applauding in the worst possible way. You take one final look at the team. They stand closer now, heads lowered, bodies angled against the storm. They are not comfortable. No one is, but they are tied, fed a little, and watched. That must be enough until the next uneasy sound. When you climb back into the wagon, the trapped warmth feels almost rich. People make space without fully waking. Someone asks if the animals are all right. You whisper yes, because yes is the blanket word of the night. You tuck your freezing hands under your arms, fold yourself back into the human nest, and listen as the oxen outside stamp once more. Then quiet. The journey depends on those dark shapes beyond the canvas. Their breath rises into the snow while yours warms the blanket near your face. Wagon, family, food, distance, destination. All of it rests on hooves and patience, and as the storm continues pressing against the plains, you begin to drift again, knowing that even sleep must leave one ear open for the animals. You drift for a while in that shallow borderland between sleep and listening, where the storm becomes part of your breathing, and the wagon's small noises seem almost familiar. Then a cough breaks the rhythm. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. It is the kind of cough that might mean nothing, just smoke in the throat. Cold air in the lungs, a dry tickle from the long day, yet inside a covered wagon in a snowstorm, small sounds grow important. A cough is not only a cough, it is a question asked in the dark. The person beside you stirs, someone whispers for water, the cup is found by touch, passed hand to hand, and nearly spilled when the wagon shudders under a gust. The sick one drinks, breathes, coughs again, then settles. You wait for another sound. For a few moments there is only wind, canvas, and the damp warmth of too many bodies under too many blankets. Cold has many ways of entering the night. Some are obvious, like the draft at the rear flap or the icy boards beneath the bedding. Others are quiet, damp stockings that never dried, a scarf made wet by breath, condensation gathering inside the canvas, sweat from walking all day, now cooling under layers of wool. Your clothing is meant to protect you, but once moisture is trapped near the skin, warmth leaks away with patient cruelty. You notice your own sleeve feels clammy at the cuff. Your mittens, tucked near your chest, are still cold inside. Your feet are warmer than before, but not warm. One heel has gone numb where it presses against the boards. You shift it and feel a slow sting return, as if tiny needles are waking one by one. Very thoughtful of them, very unnecessary. On the overland trails, exposure was not a rare inconvenience. Travellers faced heat, dust, rain, hail, sudden cold, river crossings, and long stretches without proper shelter in freezing weather. Wet clothing and exhaustion could become dangerous together. People did not use modern words like hypothermia in the way we do now, but they knew the signs of peril well enough, shaking that would not stop. Confusion, weakness, pale skin, numb fingers, and the dreadful sleepiness that might not lead to ordinary sleep. Inside the wagon, everyone is trying to manage air without losing warmth. If the rear flap is sealed too tightly, breath and smoke and dampness collect, if it is opened. The cold enters like an eager guest. The balance is miserable. You need fresh air, but fresh air is freezing. You need warmth, but warmth produces moisture. The wagon is less a cosy bedroom than a small climate experiment conducted on people who did not consent. A faint smoke smell remains from the fire and clothing. Sometimes embers, lanterns, or makeshift heat sources could add danger in enclosed spaces, especially when people tried to trap warmth too completely. Most families understood that fire and canvas were not friends, and that smoke inside could choke rather than comfort. Still, in desperation, people take risks. Tonight the heat is mostly human. With the fire outside and fading, that is safer, but colder. Safety and comfort once again. Refuse to sit at the same table. A lesser-known medical curiosity from the era is how many remedies travelled west in trunks, pockets, and memory. Families carried laudanum, camphor, quinine, peppermint, mustard plasters, castor oil, vinegar, salves, teas, and all sorts of homemade cures. Some helped a little, some mostly tasted terrible and made everyone feel busy. A mustard plaster against the chest might warm the skin and provide a sense of action. While the sufferer lay there wondering why healing had to smell so aggressive, someone in the wagon has a little packet of dried herbs, perhaps horehound or peppermint. A tea might be made if the fire can be coaxed again, but no one wants to rise yet unless the cough worsens. So the remedy for the moment is simpler. Sit up a little, keep the scarf loose, take another sip. Do not breathe the damp blanket too closely. Try to rest. Your own breathing sounds loud to you. The cloth near your mouth grows wet, so you turn your face to a cooler patch of air. It bites your nose, but it feels cleaner, above you. The canvas sags slightly under a gathering skin of snow, every now and then. A cold drop falls from the inside and lands on bedding. Not much, just enough to remind you that shelter is a process, not an object. Some medical historians continue to ask how emigrant families understood illness along the trail, especially when they blended household remedies, common sense, religious interpretation, and the limited professional medicine of the time. A fever might be seen as exposure, bad air, God's testing, spoiled food, or simply bad luck, depending on who was speaking and how frightened they were. The record is full of plain statements: sick today, better tonight, child feverish, mother weak. Behind each short note is a whole wagon holding its breath. You think of frostbite, though perhaps not with that exact term. You know ears can freeze, fingers can lose feeling, toes can turn pale and useless if neglected. Men and women on farms knew cold injuries long before modern medical charts explained them. The advice is practical and urgent. Keep moving if you must stand outside. Do not let wet socks stay against skin. Rub warmth back gently. Keep children's hands covered. Watch the quiet ones. Because the quiet ones may be getting too cold to complain. A child near the centre of the bedding has kicked free of a blanket. You notice the small shape of one foot in a stocking, exposed to the dim cold without fully sitting up. You tug the blanket back over it. The child sighs and curls deeper. There is no applause. History rarely applauds competent blanket management. Still, this is how survival often looks. Not heroic speeches, a covered foot, a loosened scarf, a cup of water passed without spilling. The sick person coughs again, then gives a little groan of apology, as if illness is poor manners. Someone says hush, not unkindly. You feel the wagon listening. The baby does not wake, which seems like a miracle worth preserving. Outside, the animals are quieter now. Snow piles against the wheels. The storm has softened its sharpest voice, but the cold has deepened. You become aware of smell again, damp breath, wool, old smoke, a trace of grease from supper, wet leather near the boots, human closeness, not unpleasant exactly, but undeniable. Poor ventilation makes every scent linger. In a modern room, air moves through vents and doors and invisible systems you barely thank. Here, air is negotiated through cracks and cloth. You're breathing the same small weather as everyone else. Your back aches. Your skin itches under too many layers. You want to stretch, but there is no room. You want to sleep. But the cough has left a thread of concern running through the dark. You want morning, though morning will bring its own work. For now, you count breaths, yours, the child's, the cougher's, the slow sleeping breaths of the others. This is not fear exactly. It is watchfulness softened by exhaustion. After a time, the coughing eases. The person lies lower, propped slightly by a rolled coat. Someone tucks a blanket around their shoulders but leaves space near the face. You feel the wagon settle again, not physically but emotionally. The crisis, if it was one, has stepped back into the shadows. Cold remains, damp remains, hidden illness remains possible. Yet so does care. You're surrounded by discomfort, but also by people trained through necessity to notice small changes in one another. A hand to a forehead, a foot covered, a cut past, a knot retied, a body shifted closer. These are the quiet medicines of the night, not listed proudly in any guidebook, but practiced again and again beneath canvas, under snow, across the long white plains. Your eyes close. The cloth at your cheek is still scratchy. Your toes still complain. The air is stale, then briefly fresh when a gust finds a seam. You breathe it in, cold and clean, and let it go slowly. The storm presses softly now. The wagon holds its damp, fragile warmth. Somewhere in the dark, sickness waits, but so does sleep, and sleep, careful and shallow, returns first. Sleep lets you drift only far enough to lose track of your own discomfort, then pulls away again when something brushes the wagon side with a heavy, sliding sound. You wake with your heart already listening. For a moment you do not move. The darkness inside the wagon feels thick, full of breathing bodies and damp wool. The storm has quieted in one way, but deepened in another. Less howling now, more weight. Snow is piling up. Someone near the rear flap lifts their head. You hear the tiny scrape of a mitten against canvas, then a whisper drifts against the wheels. The words move through the wagon without panic, but with that tired seriousness everyone recognizes. A drift against the wheels can freeze hard by morning. Snow packed along the wagon side can press against the canvas, bend ropes, bury gear, block the flap, and make the wagon colder by trapping wetness where you do not want it. Apparently bedtime on the plains includes maintenance chores, very restful, very spa-like, if the spa dislikes you. You rise because someone must. Your joints object in several languages, your hip has stiffened from the boards, and your knees feel packed with sand. You pull your scarf back over your mouth, reach for your boots, and try to slide your feet in without waking the child near your legs. The child sleeps with the trust of someone who does not yet understand ropes, drifts, oxen, or adults pretending to be calm. The rear flap opens just wide enough for you to slip through. Cold air enters in a clean, brutal sheet, outside. The camp has become strange and quiet, reshaped by snow until familiar objects look unfinished. The wagons are rounded white mounds. The fire is nearly buried, only a faint red glow breathing under ashen flakes. Lantern light turns the falling snow into a swarm of pale sparks. The sky is invisible. The ground is almost invisible. The world is mostly motionless white, except where the wind lifts loose powder and sends it curling around your legs. You step down and sink deeper than expected. Snow slides over the top of one boot. Wonderful. Your stocking will remember this insult for hours. You steady yourself with a hand on the wheel rim. The iron is so cold it seems to bite through your mitten beneath the new snow. The older mud has stiffened into ridges, and every step has to be tested before weight follows. A fallout here would be embarrassing at best and dangerous at worst. And history is already very committed to making you undignified. Night work was a normal part of wagon travel when weather, animals, or equipment demanded attention. Wagons needed constant repair and adjustment, from wheels and axles to covers, tongues, brakes, and harness. A snowstorm only compresses those duties into cold darkness. When fingers work poorly and judgment comes wrapped in exhaustion, the trail does not pause because the sun has gone down. It simply changes the lighting and lowers morale. You begin clearing snow from the rear of the wagon, using a shovel if one can be found, a board if not, and your boot when all else fails. The drift has formed along the downwind side, soft at the top and denser near the wheel. You push it away in slow strokes. Snow squeaks under the shovel edge. Your breath sounds loud inside the scarf. Each movement sends cold air into your sleeves, beneath the canvas. Someone inside shifts to keep warmth from escaping too quickly. Another figure joins you from a nearby wagon, lantern in hand. Their face is mostly hidden by scarf and hat, but the eyes look half asleep and deeply offended. Together you work along the wagon line, clearing around wheels, tongues, and openings. You do not need everything bare. That would be impossible. You only need enough space so people can get out. Ropes can be checked, and the wagon is not gradually sealed into place like a household object forgotten in a snowbank. One peculiar trick used in winter travel and camp life was to mark or keep important tools in fixed places so they could be found by touch, not sight. A shovel leaned under the wagon tongue, a lantern hung on the same peg, an axe kept near the front wheel. In a storm, searching for a tool can become its own little disaster. Tonight, you bless whoever insisted the shovel belonged in one place, because wandering around muttering, "Where is it into a blizzard?" is not a noble pioneer skill. The ropes come next. Snow has gathered on the canvas cover and pulled at the side ties. You brush what you can from the lower edge, then feel along the knots. Some are stiff but sound. One has loosened where wet rope stretched and then froze. You tug it, test it, and retie it with mittened hands. The knot is ugly. It is not a sailor's knot. It is not a decorative knot. It is a tired person's cold knot, which means if it holds until dawn, it is perfect. The canvas above you sags slightly between the wooden bows. Too much snow there can add weight. And though the cover is not a roof in the house sense, it still must shed what it can. You reach up with the handle of the shovel and tap the underside of the canvas from outside. Snow slides down in a soft rush, spilling over your shoulder and into your collar. You freeze in place, absorbing the betrayal. Somewhere nearby, someone gives a quiet laugh. You would laugh too. But your neck is full of weather. The animals need another glance. Not a full feeding. Not unless trouble shows, but enough to confirm that no rope has tangled and no animal is lying down in a bad position. You walk the short, trampled path toward them, though the path is already blurred. The oxen stand as dark shapes, dusted white along their backs. One turns its head when the lantern approaches, another stamps, shaking snow from its fetlocks. Their breath rises thick and slow. They are alive, upright, and annoyed. This is acceptable. You clear snow from a rope that is sunk near a hoof. You move it higher, away from the animal's legs. A tangled line in darkness can panic a team. And panic spreads quickly among animals penned close together. your hands are numb again, which makes every task feel as if you're performing it through someone else's fingers. You flex them inside the mittens. Pain returns in little hot sparks. Congratulations. Feeling has rejoined the expedition. Questions remain among present-day researchers about how much nighttime labour fell to women. Men, hired drivers, older children, or whoever happened to wake first. Many accounts describe the day's travel and the camp routine more clearly than the half-dream chores after midnight. Yet those chores must have happened constantly. Fires revived, babies soothed, animals checked, wheels secured, blankets rescued from leaks. The written record gives us the outline. The cold fills in the rest. You go back toward the wagon and pause near the fire. It has not died completely, under a cap of ash. A few coals glow like buried rubies. You crouch and shield them from falling snow while someone brings a handful of dry chips and shaved wood. Carefully, almost tenderly, you feed the embers. A thread of smoke rises, then a small flame licks upward, fragile and yellow. No one wants a large fire now, just enough life to make morning easier, enough heat to melt a little snow if someone wakes desperate for water. The smoke smells damp and earthy. It curls around your face, making your eyes water. You're too tired to be angry at it. Smoke is simply another resident of the camp, unpleasant but familiar. You warm your hands briefly above the flame, careful not to warm them too quickly. Sudden heat against very cold skin can hurt sharply. Slow warmth is kinder. One more chore remains. The rear flap of the wagon has begun to crust with ice where breath from inside meets the cold outside. You scrape the edge gently so it can open if needed. It makes a thin rasping sound. This little act feels ridiculous until you imagine needing to get out quickly and finding the flap frozen shut. Then it feels wise. Many survival measures look fussy until the moment they save you trouble. At last, you climb back inside. The warmth hits you first, then the smell, human breath, wool, damp leather, smoke, supper, all of it waiting patiently. People shift to make a narrow space for you. Someone asks about the wheels. You whisper cleared. Someone asks about the animals. You whisper standing. Someone asks about the fire. You whisper alive. 3 small words, and the wagon relaxes around them. You push your boots back under the bedding. Though one is now wetter than before, your fingers throb as they warm. Snow in your collar melts and runs down your back in a thin, cold line. A private little creak of misery. You breathe through it. Complaining would wake the baby, and the baby has done nothing to deserve your review of the evening. You settle again among the bodies. Colder than when you left, but calmer in another way. The wagon has been checked. The ropes hold. The animals stand. The fire has a pulse. The snow continues to fall, but for now it is outside, and you are inside, wrapped once more in the crowded dark. The night has taken its toll in inches, knots, and numb fingers. You have paid what it asked, at least for this hour. Slowly, with one ear still open, you let the storm blur again into a hush, knowing that the next sound may call you back, but not yet. The wagon grows quiet again, but not peaceful in any simple way. Quiet on the plains has weight. It presses around the canvas and waits in the little pauses between gusts. You lie with your eyes closed, shoulder against a sack, cheek against scratchy wool. And you feel the immense dark outside stretching in every direction. The camp is small. The storm is large. The land beyond both is larger still. This is the hour when fear changes shape. Earlier, fear had tasks attached to it. Tighten the rope, check the oxen, clear the drift, keep the fire alive. Practical fear is almost useful, because it gives your hands something to do. Now your hands are tucked under your arms, your boots are hidden beneath bedding, and the wagon is holding as well as it can, with nothing immediate to fix. Your mind begins wandering where it should not. You think of distance. Behind you are the places that once gave life its edges, a house, perhaps, a lane, a church bell, neighbours who knew your name without asking, a bed near a wall that did not sway. Ahead of you is a country mostly known through talk, letters, guidebooks, and hope. In between lies this frozen plain, tonight so white and dark at once that it feels less like a place than a test. You're neither there nor here. You are suspended in weather. By 1852, the overland routes to Oregon, California, and Utah were heavily travelled compared with the first years of organised migration. Yet the journey still carried deep uncertainty. Wagon trains followed established trails, crossed known rivers, and sometimes encountered trading posts, ferries, guides, or military roads. Even so, every company faced weather, illness, breakdowns, accidents, hunger, lost animals, and the sheer emotional strain of distance. A road can be known and still feel lonely when snow erases it in the night. Inside the wagon, the sleeping bodies around you should make the world feel less empty. Mostly, they do. Yet their presence also reminds you of what can be lost. The child breathing near your sleeve, the person with the cough, the older woman tucked under the better quilt, the man who went out earlier and came back with the ice in his beard. Everyone is warm only because everyone remains together. The thought is comforting until it becomes frightening. A sound rises far away. Perhaps a howl, perhaps wind passing over the low bank, perhaps a rope vibrating against a wagon tongue. You cannot tell. Snow makes the world uncertain. It throws a white cloth over distance and muffles direction. A noise from 20 yards away may seem beyond the horizon. A noise beyond the horizon may seem at your wheel, your mind, unhelpfully creative. Supplies wolves, thieves, lost travellers, and every story told around fires by people who enjoyed scaring children and adults with equal generosity. Rumours were part of trail life. Emigrants traded news at river crossings, camps, forts, and passing wagon trains. Some reports were useful, such as water ahead, cholera behind, a cut-off too dry, a bridge washed out. Others grew in the telling, a dangerous band nearby, a family frozen in the mountains, a party robbed, a shortcut that saved weeks, or ruined everyone who tried it. Information moved by mouth, and every mile rubbed it smoother or stranger. One of the more peculiar habits of anxious travel was the way ordinary landmarks took on exaggerated emotional importance. A lone tree, a grave marker, a broken wagon part, a skull beside the trail. These became signs, warnings, or dark little companions in memory. Travellers sometimes counted graves, named creeks after misfortunes, or repeated stories attached to places with uncertain accuracy. The landscape became a book written in objects, and not all of its chapters were relaxing bedtime material. Sorry about that. The plains have notes. You remember a broken chair seen days ago near the trail, half buried in frost and grass. At the time, someone joked about the owner finally discovering good taste. But now, in the dark, it feels different. Someone carried that chair with intention. Someone believed there would be room for it in a future home. Then the trail demanded weight be shed, and the chair was left to weather, insects, and the curiosity of strangers. How many hopes are scattered like that between the rivers and the mountains' featherbeds, trunks, tools, china, books, heirlooms. Each abandoned thing says the same quiet sentence. We thought we could bring more. You draw the blanket closer. Fear also comes from not knowing where you are. Not exactly. Maps exist. Guides exist. People speak of rivers, forks, bluffs, and miles. But your body knows only the last hard day and the next uncertain morning. In a snowstorm, familiar signs vanish. The trail disappears under white, wheel ruts fill, landforms blur. Even the direction of sunrise must wait until there is a sun. You trust the company, the animals, memory, compass if one is carried, and the experience of those who claim confidence. Confidence, you have noticed, is not always the same as correctness. Questions remain in historical writing about how emigrants balanced optimism against dread while describing the journey. Letters sent home often emphasized progress and faith, perhaps to reassure relatives or justify the great risk already taken. Private diaries could be plainer, even bleak, though many still compress terror into tidy sentences. Lying here, you understand the compression. Fear is too large to write every night. After a while, you might simply put cold and bad weather, and let the page carry the rest in silence. A child murmurs in sleep, then settles. Someone's stomach growls softly, which in another setting would be funny. Here it is only human. You shift your legs and feel the ache of miles. The body holds a map of the day, shoulders from lifting, feet from walking, back from crouching, hands from knots. Even fear has a place in the body, low in the chest, tight in the throat, behind the eyes. You think, too, of people whose presence haunts the trail even when unseen. Indigenous nations live across and within these plains, with their own homelands, roots, winter knowledge, and political realities. Emigrant accounts often turned native people into fears, obstacles, or brief encounters, while native perspectives tell a far larger story of invasion, disruption, trade, diplomacy, resistance, and survival. Tonight, inside your wagon, you may carry the narrow fears of your party, but the land itself is not empty. And it is not merely scenery for your journey. It has histories older than the ruts your wheels follow. That thought does not make the night simpler. It makes it deeper. The storm outside covers tracks, but it cannot erase the fact that many lives meet on these plains, not always fairly, not always peacefully, often without understanding. You are one traveller in a moving line of wants, fears, hunger, ambition, and grief. The wagon feels smaller when you know that. Perhaps more honest too. The wind softens again. The canvas stops snapping and begins to murmur. Snow pads the wagon sides until sounds from outside seem far away. The camp becomes a cluster of hidden breaths. You imagine each wagon holding its own little universe, a mother counting children in the dark, a young man pretending not to be afraid, an old farmer dreaming of a field he's not yet seen, a girl listening to the storm and deciding whether she will remember it as adventure or misery. Maybe both. Most true memories have more than one flavour. Your own fear begins to tire. It cannot keep its grip forever. The body, mercifully rude, interrupts big thoughts with smaller needs. Your nose is cold. Your hip hurts. Your foot has fallen asleep. Someone has stolen a corner of blanket and you reclaim it with slow diplomacy. The grandeur of loneliness reduces itself to wool, toes, and breathing. Still, before sleep returns, you let yourself feel the size of the plains, not as a map, not as a national myth, not as a painting with golden grass and heroic wagons. You feel them as a vast dark cold around a handful of people under canvas, trying to cross from one life to another. The fear is real, so is the courage, though it looks less like boldness than staying put, staying warm, checking the ropes, and answering a child softly when you do not know what morning will bring. The storm continues, the wagon holds. Your companions sleep, somewhere beyond sight. The trail waits under snow, temporarily erased but not gone. You breathe in the damp, crowded air and let it out slowly, for this hour. You do not need to conquer the plains. You only need to remain inside this fragile shelter, among these inconvenient beloved bodies, until darkness thins and the world becomes visible again. The fear loosens, not because the storm has ended, but because the body cannot hold every feeling at full strength forever. Your thoughts drift down from the great wide plains to the small warmth of the wagon, breath, blanket, shoulder, the scratch of wool beneath your chin, the faint smell of coffee still living in the tin cup near your hand. Misery remains, yes, but it has edges now, and inside those edges people begin doing what people always do. They make little comforts. No one announces this. There is no ceremony called "Now we shall preserve morale." That would be too grand. And also someone would tell the announcer to keep quiet because the baby is finally asleep. Instead, comfort enters quietly. Someone shifts a folded coat under an aching neck. Someone passes the last warm swallow from a cup. Someone tucks a loose blanket around the child again, even though that child is clearly a skilled blanket escape artist. Tiny acts, repeated in the dark, become a kind of household music. You reach toward the hanging pouch near the wagon bow and find a small keepsake by touch. Perhaps it is a letter. Folded so often the creases feel soft. Perhaps a ribbon, a thimble, a miniature likeness, a smooth pebble from home carried for reasons that become harder and more important with distance. The object is not useful in the plain sense. It will not mend a wheel, boil water, or pull the wagon, yet it steadies you. Usefulness, out here, has more than one meaning. Many emigrants carried Bibles, hymnals, letters, locks of hair, family records, and small personal treasures across the plains. Even when larger furniture had to be abandoned, written words mattered intensely in a world where distance could swallow families for months or years. A letter from home might be read until its folds weakened, not because the news changed, but because the voice inside it kept returning. Tonight, even if you do not read by lantern light, you know where the letter rests, and that knowledge warms a place no blanket reaches. A whisper begins near the front of the wagon. Someone is telling a story, not a long one, not the kind that requires everyone to sit up and participate, just a soft thread of memory, half for the children and half for the adults pretending not to need it. A story about a winter back home when the creek froze so hard the boys skated on it. A story about a neighbour's pig wandering into church. A story about a wedding supper where the cake collapsed and everyone ate it anyway. These are not grand frontier epics. They are better. They remind you that life is more than surviving the next mile. Humour works carefully in the dark. Too loud and it wakes the cold. Too sharp and it turns into complaint. But a little dry amusement can keep despair from getting too comfortable. Someone murmurs that the wagon is now warmer than the barn used to be, assuming the barn was full of damp socks and onions. Someone else says the oxen have better sense than the humans because they never volunteered for this trip. A quiet laugh moves under the blankets, small and tired, but real. One unusual detail from trail life is that music sometimes came from surprisingly portable sources: a fiddle, a flute, a mouth harp, or even a simple song carried by memory could travel farther than many pieces of furniture. People sang hymns, popular ballads, comic songs, and sentimental tunes in better weather. Music might accompany dancing in camp. Tonight there is no dancing unless you count shivering, which seems ungenerous. But a tune hummed low can still settle the nerves. A woman begins humming a hymn so softly it is almost part of the wind. The melody moves through the wagon without asking anyone to join. Then one voice adds a phrase, then another. The words are incomplete, but everyone knows enough to let the tune continue, in the darkness. The song becomes less about performance than breathing together. Notes rise and fall with the storm's hush outside. You feel the child near you relax. One small hand open against the blanket. There are social questions modern researchers still struggle to fully answer here, especially how comfort, faith, humour, and homesickness differed by age, gender, class, and religious background on the trail. A young unmarried man might describe joking by the fire. A mother might record sickness, washing, food, and children. A child might later remember the music more than the fear. The same night can survive in several memories, each one true to the person who carried it. Your own comfort comes partly through the cup. Someone has saved a little warm drink, now barely more than lukewarm, but you cradle it anyway. Coffee, tea, or herb water. It does not matter much. The cup's metal has cooled, but the last sip still tastes faintly of smoke and supper. You drink slowly, because small things last longer when you respect them. It slides down your throat, not hot enough to change the cold, but warm enough to change your mood. Near your elbow, an older person fingers a string of beads or perhaps the edge of a worn book. Prayer may be spoken or silent. Some travellers relied deeply on religious faith during the journey, marking Sundays when possible, holding services in camp, singing hymns, reading scripture, and interpreting hardships through providence. Others may have been less devout, or simply too exhausted to shape fear into theology every evening. The wagon can hold all of them at once: faith, doubt, sleepiness, and a desperate desire for dry socks make crowded companions. You think of bedtime rituals back home: a candle snuffed, a door latched, a child kissed, ashes banked on the hearth. Maybe the same motions are being remade here in rougher form. The canvas flap tied tight becomes the door. The embers under ash become the hearth. The child tucked in a shawl becomes the kiss. Ritual does not require comfort. It requires repetition. Do this, then this, then this, and the night becomes less wild. The wagon creaks, but softly now. Snow has padded the world. The storm still moves, yet its voice feels farther away. Someone begins reciting lines from memory, perhaps scripture, perhaps poetry, perhaps a bit of a comic rhyme learned years ago. Words are carried carefully, like coals, in an age before recordings. Memory itself is entertainment, comfort, education, and archive. You carry songs in your chest because there is nowhere else to pack them. You rest your hand on the small keepsake again, in the dark. Its surface is everything: smooth paper, worn cloth, cold metal. It gives your mind a place to stand. You imagine the person who gave it to you, or the room where it once lay, or the future shelf where you hope to place it when the journey is over. Maybe that future shelf is foolish. Maybe it is necessary. Hope often survives by attaching itself to ordinary furniture. The baby wakes enough to fuss, and several adults freeze with comic dread. Please, little person, not now, not after all we have achieved. A soft murmur, a shift of arms, a shawl pulled close, and the baby settles again. The entire wagon silently congratulates itself. No medals are awarded, but there should be. Then comes a quieter stretch. No one speaks for a while. The comfort has done its work. The story, the song, the cup, the joke, the letter. All these little things have not defeated the storm. They have not made the board softer or the air dry. But they have reminded everyone that hardship is not the only reality inside the wagon. Memory is here. Affection is here. A ridiculous onion overhead is here. Human beings, even half frozen and badly folded, remain strangely gifted at making meaning from scraps. You nestle deeper into the shared warmth. Your eyelids grow heavy. The last tune fades into breath. Outside, snow continues its patient work, covering ruts, hoof prints, ashes, and the dark shapes of the plains. Inside, The wagon holds a smaller weather murmurs, sighs, damp wool, fading fear, and the gentle, stubborn glow of people refusing to be only miserable. The keepsake rests beneath your hand as sleep approaches again. You do not need to explain why it matters. It matters because it came from before, and it points toward after between those two places. Tonight, you lie under canvas in 1852, crossing a white and wind-blown world, warmed by songs soft enough not to wake the storm. The small comforts fade into the deep middle of the night, and sleep settles over the wagon again in uneven patches. You drift, wake, drift, and wake. Never fully sure which sounds belong to dreams and which belong to the storm. The song is gone now. The cup is empty. The keepsake rests somewhere beneath your hand, tucked safe in the dark, for a little while. The wagon feels less like a shelter and more like a thought being held together by tired people. Then the canvas gives a low, heavy sag. It is not a loud failure. That might almost be easier, because a crash tells everyone what to fear. This is quieter, a slow bowing overhead, a deepening curve between the wooden ribs, a soft pressure that changes the shape of the darkness above your face. Snow has been gathering on the cover. The earlier tapping and whispering have become weight. Someone notices at the same moment you do. A body stirs near the front. A hand reaches up, presses the canvas from inside, and meets resistance. Not much, perhaps. Not enough to panic, but enough to sit everyone a little straighter in their blankets. A covered wagon's canvas is tough, but it is not a house roof. It is stretched over wooden boughs, tied down along the sides, and expected to shed weather while the wagon moves, when snow falls wet and heavy, especially if wind packs it into folds. That cover can sag, the bows can strain, ropes can loosen, water can seep. The whole beautiful concept of portable shelter begins to feel very theoretical. You pull yourself upright, grumbling softly into your scarf. Your body has become a collection of complaints held together by wool. The child beside you wakes halfway and asks if it is morning. No, someone whispers, the cruelest answer in any century. Not morning, not yet. A man outside calls for someone to lift from within. Another person curses under their breath, not with grand profanity, just the exhausted little mutter of a person who has discovered a new chore at an old hour. You raise both hands overhead and press against the cold belly of the canvas. It is wet and stiff, and the snow above it feels strangely alive. Shifting under your palms, you push. The canvas rises an inch, then settles back. You push again. From outside, someone taps the cover with a pole or shovel handle. Snow slides off in a muffled rush. Some of it thumps onto the wagon side. Some spills down near the rear flap. A thin shower of icy droplets rains from the canvas inside, landing on blankets, faces, and one deeply offended neck. You hear a tiny gasp, then a whisper. Lovely. Delivered with the kind of calm sarcasm that belongs beside hardship like salt beside bacon. The wagon structure matters now. The boughs overhead are usually made from bent hardwood strips, light enough to flex, strong enough to hold the cover, but not designed for endless burden. The wheels, axle, sideboards, tongue, and box all endure strain from travel, weather, and load. Families on the trail carried spare parts when they could, including axle grease, tools, bolts, rawhide, rope, and sometimes extra spokes. Repairs were not occasional surprises. Repairs were the journey's background music. You remember the shovel's place, the rope's rough fibres, the stiff knots from your earlier midnight chores. Those small tasks return as reassurance. The wagon has not been ignored. It has been tended. Still, weather has a talent for finding the one weakness everyone missed. A loose seam, a frayed tie, a cracked bow, a corner of canvas worn thin by rubbing against a crate. The storm is not intelligent, of course, but it behaves like a meticulous inspector with icy hands. One curious practice from frontier repair culture was the use of rawhide as a quick fastening material. Wet rawhide could be wrapped around a broken part, and as it dried, it tightened hard on a dry day. That could be extremely useful in a snowstorm with everything damp and freezing. It becomes less magical, more complicated, and very much the kind of solution someone suggests while everyone else sighs into the dark. Another load of snow slides from the roof. The wagon springs upwards slightly, almost relieved. You feel the change at once. The canvas lifts farther from your face. The air seems larger. A child laughs sleepily, perhaps because falling snow sounded like a giant animal rolling off the wagon. For one breath. The danger becomes absurd, and absurdity is welcome. If your roof is going to threaten you, it might as well do it with comedic timing. Yet the worry does not fully pass. The canvas has stretched in one place. A drip has begun near the left side, falling steadily onto the edge of a blanket. That blanket is moved. A spare cloth is pushed under the leak to catch water before it spreads. Someone checks the cargo beneath it, because wet bedding is miserable, but wet flour is a domestic tragedy with consequences. A sack is shifted, then another, in the dark. Hands pass bundles, tins and cloths with quiet urgency. There is also the matter of weight against the wheels. Snow has drifted high on one side again, packed by the wind. If it freezes hard around the spokes and hubs, morning will become more difficult. If meltwater creeps in and refreezes, the wheels may be locked until chopped free. Wheels are not merely circles in this world. They are escape, progress, and all tomorrow's miles. You cannot let the storm take them casually. Outside, two people begin clearing around the wagon again. You hear the scrape of shovel against crust, the thud of snow thrown aside, the short breath of someone working in bitter cold. You want to help, and also you want never to leave the blankets again. This inner conflict is timeless. Courage, in practice, often sounds like a tired person saying, "Fine," and putting wet boots back on. This time, however, you remain inside to manage the cargo and bedding. Your hands move through shadow. The crate near the rear has shifted during the storm, pressing against the flap and making it harder to open. You drag it back a few inches. It resists, then slides suddenly, knocking your shin. You bite back a yelp. Very good, quiet suffering. The children sleep on, which is the frontier version of success. Modern interpretation of trail hardship often has to weigh dramatic stories against everyday maintenance. Did wagons often fail catastrophically in storms? Or did families mostly prevent disaster through relentless small repairs? The surviving accounts give both impressions. There are broken axles, tipped wagons, torn covers, and abandoned goods. There are also thousands of ordinary nights where something nearly went wrong, then did not, because someone noticed, tied, lifted, patched, cleared, or stayed awake a little longer than they wanted to. Tonight you're living inside that second kind of history, not the famous catastrophe, the narrow escape, the kind no one may write down except as snowed hard, little rest, the kind that leaves no monument, a bow strained but held, a rope iced but retied, a sack moved before water reached it, a child kept dry, a wheel dug out, a roof persuaded not to collapse by several tired hands and a shovel handle. The storm presses again, but lighter now. The cover has been cleared, the drift has been cut back, the leak is caught in a cloth, the cargo is wedged more safely. You hear the workers outside return, stamping snow from their boots before crawling back into their own shelters. The camp quiets, one wagon at a time. You settle down slowly. The blanket beneath you is colder where droplets fell, so you turn it, fold it, and pretend that solves everything. Someone near you murmurs that the wagon held. Another voice answers, for now, which is honest but not helpful. Still, honesty has its place. You smile faintly into the dark. The canvas overhead rises in a gentler curve again. It still smells of wet cloth and cold air. It still trembles when the wind passes over the camp. But it is above you, not on you. And that distinction feels very important. The wagon has almost failed, or seemed to. It has reminded everyone that shelter is not a promise made once. It is a relationship maintained all night. You lie beneath the bowed ribs, listening to drips slow, ropes creak, and snow slides softly from the sides. Your body returns to its crooked shape among the others. Your shin aches from the crate. Your hands smell of damp canvas. Your heart, which had risen sharply, begins to lower itself again. The night is not finished. The storm is not kind, but the wagon remains upright, canvas tied, wheels partly cleared, its little household still breathing within. You close your eyes under that fragile roof, and the next stretch of darkness begins. The next stretch of darkness is the longest one, or at least it feels that way. Night has a strange way of stretching near its end, as if dawn is standing just beyond the plain, taking its time with buttons, boots, and breakfast. You lie under the curved canvas, listening to the quieter storm, and you understand why people have always given the hours before morning a reputation for cruelty. They are cold, slow, and full of thoughts that should have gone to sleep before you did. The wagon holds. That is the first comfort. Not warmly, not gracefully, not with anything that could be mistaken for hospitality, but it holds. The canvas above you is raised again after the snow was pushed away. The drip near the side has slowed to an occasional cold tap into the cloth below it. The wheels are not buried. As far as anyone knows, the animals are quiet. The fire outside has a hidden pulse under ash. These are small victories, but small victories are the only kind the night is handing out. You're folded into a shape no person would choose in daylight. Your knees are bent, one arm trapped beneath your side, your shoulder pressed against the flour sack that has been promoted from cargo to enemy pillow. A child's foot rests near your ribs. Someone's breath warms the back of your neck in little damp waves. Your own scarf has become clammy. So you turn your face slightly toward the wagon wall and find a cooler pocket of air. Cold works differently now. Earlier, it attacked. It bit cheeks, fingers, and ankles with bright little teeth. Now it seeps. It has entered the boards, the blankets, the clothing seams. It has found the places where warmth is thinnest and settled there with patient confidence. Your body is tired of shivering, so the tremors come only now and then, passing through you like a small animal shaking water from its fur. On the plains, the coldest part of the night often comes near dawn, after the ground and air have been losing heat for hours, without a house, stove, or thick walls. People feel that slow bottoming out in their bones. The wagon's canvas blocks wind and snow, but it does not hold heat like plaster, timber, and a hearth. Inside, breath and bodies do what they can. Outside, the dark keeps taking. You try to tell time. There is no clock you can easily see. A watch might exist in the company, tucked carefully away, but you are not reaching for it now, so time is measured by other things. The intervals between gusts, the fading of the embers glimpsed through a slit in the flap, the number of times the baby stirs, the ache in your hip, the changing tone of the storm. Frontier timekeeping. Very poetic and very inconvenient. A rooster would be helpful, though also absurd out here. Some emigrants did carry chickens for eggs early in the journey, along with milk cows, pigs, or other livestock. But many such animals were sold, eaten, lost, or became too burdensome as miles accumulated. The thought of a rooster announcing dawn from inside this wagon is ridiculous enough to nearly make you smile. Imagine the entire camp, half frozen and sleep-starved, being judged by poultry. Honestly, it might improve morale. Instead of a rooster, you listen for the wind. Its direction has changed slightly. You cannot prove it, but your skin knows. The draft through the rear flap is weaker. The canvas no longer snaps from the same angle. Snow still falls, perhaps, but it sounds finer now, more like powder brushing cloth than heavy flakes striking and clinging. The storm may be tiring, or perhaps you are. Sometimes the difference is hard to tell. A low murmur begins near the front. Not conversation exactly, more like the sound of someone checking whether another person is awake. A whispered question, a whispered answer. The animals are quiet. The fire might need stirring soon. No one moves yet. The knowledge of a chore does not instantly produce a volunteer. Everyone lies still in the sacred interval between realizing work exists and admitting it aloud. There is a small art to preserving heat inside shared bedding. You do not fling the blanket back. You do not sit up quickly unless you must. You lift edges carefully, tuck gaps, move slowly, and try not to send a sheet of cold air across everyone's legs. This is not written in guidebooks as a grand principle, but any tired wagon family learns it fast. Warmth escapes like gossip. Once loose, everyone suffers. Questions linger among historians of daily life about how emigrants described time psychologically rather than mechanically. Diaries often say a long night, no sleep, or weather very bad. But those phrases do not fully capture how minutes behave inside discomfort. A single hour can contain a dozen awakenings, 100 small adjustments, and one bleak philosophical conversation with your own left foot. Written records compress time. The body expands it. Your left foot, incidentally, is having opinions again. You wiggle your toes. The stocking is damp but not icy. Good. The boot nearby is still flexible enough. You hope. Better. You press your heel against the bedding, then tuck both feet closer to another person's legs. They shift in sleep but do not protest. In this wagon, warmth is communal property. Your toes are merely making a modest claim. The cloth catching the leak gives a faint plop as another drop falls. Then nothing. Then another. It becomes almost soothing. An accidental water clock inside the wagon. Plop. Pause. Plop. The sound says the canvas is still wet, still working, still not entirely trustworthy. But it also says nothing worse is happening. No tearing, no cracking bow, no rush of snow inside. Just one stubborn leak marking time like a sleepy metronome. You think of the animals again, the oxen standing in the dark with snow along their backs, their great bodies turned from the wind, their slow chewing earlier, their eyes in lantern light, patient and accusing. If morning comes pale and calm, they will be yoked again, or perhaps rested if the snow is too deep. Every plan depends on their condition. Every mile west begins with their hooves. It is humbling, really. Your future rests partly on creatures who would probably prefer hay, shelter, and absolutely no manifest destiny. The phrase itself is not something everyone in your wagon would use, though the idea of westward promise moves through the age. Land, gold, religious refuge, health, debt, ambition, family, grief, all push people onto the trail for different reasons. By this hour, those reasons feel far away. Ideals do not keep the fingers warm, but they hover in the background like distant lamps, dimmed by snow but not extinguished. Somewhere outside, a faint greyness may be gathering. You cannot see it yet inside the wagon, but the dark feels thinner. The canvas above you shifts from black to a deep, uncertain blue. Shapes inside the wagon begin to separate from one another. A hanging pouch, the curve of a bow, the outline of a bonnet, a child's cheek under a shawl. It is not dawn, not fully. It is the suggestion of dawn, which may be even kinder because it asks less of you. The storm's voice lowers. Snow slides softly from the wagon side, landing with a padded thump. Someone stirs and sits up slowly, careful with the blankets. No one speaks loudly. Loudness would be disrespectful to the fragile relief beginning to form. The night has not ended, but it has started to loosen its grip. You breathe in and notice the air has changed too. Still stale, still damp, still smoky. But beneath it there is a sharper freshness from outside, the kind of cold that belongs to early morning rather than deep night. The rear flap lifts for a moment, just a crack, and pale light slips in, not warm light, not golden, more like pewter, but visible, wonderful, beautiful visibility, the most underrated luxury on earth. You see the edge of the bedding, rumpled and dark with damp in spots. You see frost feathers along the inner canvas where breath froze during the night. You see the tired faces around you, softened by sleep, discomfort, and survival. Everyone looks older than yesterday evening and also very much alive, a fine combination, considering the circumstances. For a moment, he moves. The wagon holds its breath with you. The long cold hours before dawn have done their worst, mostly, and you have answered by remaining, not heroically, not elegantly, with numb fingers, cramped legs, stale air, and a wet collar. But still, you have remained. Outside, morning waits behind snow cloud and wind. Soon there will be counting, checking, digging, feeding, deciding. Soon the world beyond canvas will need to be faced. For now, in this pale threshold between night and day, you lie still a little longer, feeling the first thin mercy of light touch the wagon wall. The pale light grows slowly, not bright enough to warm anything, but enough to reveal what the night has been doing while you tried to sleep through it. You lie still for one last breath inside the wagon, looking up at the frost feathered along the canvas. It has formed in delicate white patterns where human breath met the cold roof. Beautiful in the way inconvenient things sometimes are. Then someone lifts the rear flap, and morning enters with a soft grey glare. Snow has remade the camp. The wheels are half buried, the wagon tongues wear white caps. The low fire is a dark hollow in the snow, with a thread of smoke rising from ash. The oxen stand beyond the wagons, large and patient, their backs dusted pale, their breath drifting upward in slow clouds. The world is quiet in a new way, not the deep listening quiet of midnight, but the stunned quiet after weather has spent itself. You crawl out stiffly, every joint making private remarks. Your boots are damp but usable. Your coat has dried in some places and frozen in others, which is a bold textile choice. When your feet meet the snow, the surface crust breaks under you with a soft crunch. Cold air fills your lungs. It smells clean, smoky, animal, and faintly metallic, like iron rims and winter sky. The first work of morning is counting. People count children, blankets, tools, animals, sacks, wheels, and one another's faces, not formally, perhaps, but with glances and questions. Is anyone missing? Is anyone feverish? Did the canvas tear? Did the flour stay dry? Are the oxen sound? The answers come in fragments. Here, fine enough, wet at the corner, one rope snapped, fire still alive. Nobody says the night was easy. Nobody needs to. By the early 1850s, wagon trains on the main emigrant routes had become moving communities with routines for morning and evening. But each day still began with practical uncertainty. Animals had to be fed or grazed, fires rebuilt, water found, Meals made, wagons repaired, loads checked, and the road judged before travel could continue after snow. All of that takes longer. Morning is not a fresh start so much as a careful inventory of what survived the dark. You help brush snow from the canvas with a pole, more gently now that you can see what you're doing. The cover lifts, relieved of a weight. The leak from the night has left a damp patch on one blanket and spared the flour by only a few inches. That feels like a small miracle, though the flour sack itself looks smugly unaware of its narrow escape. You shift it to a safer place and smooth the bedding. Though calling it bedding after this night seems generous, it is more like an exhausted landscape of wool. The wheels must be freed. Snow is packed around the hubs and spokes, not frozen solid everywhere. Thank mercy! But enough to require digging. A shovel scrapes, a boot kicks. A gloved hand clears what tools cannot reach. The iron rims show dark against white. Under the snow, mud waits, because of course it does. History enjoys layering its discomforts. Near the animal line, the oxen are examined one by one, hooves, legs, yokes, ropes, shoulders. One animal has rubbed a patch raw where harness shifted. Another looks dull-eyed with fatigue but stands steadily. They are given feed from the guarded supply. Not much, because the journey ahead still has needs of its own. Their chewing sounds calm, heavy, and wonderfully ordinary. The whole camp seems to breathe easier when the animals eat. An odd little morning habit in many camps was the search for small lost things revealed by daylight, a spoon dropped in snow. A mitten stiffened near the fire. A pin, a knife, a cup, a child's button, a bootlace. After a storm. The camp becomes a treasure hunt hosted by misery. You find the tin cup half buried near the wagon wheel, rinsed clean by snow and cold enough to punish bare skin. Someone claims it triumphantly, as if recovering family silver. There is uncertainty in how later memory shaped nights like this. Some accounts of the trail turn hardship into heroic endurance, while others preserve the small humiliations more clearly cold meals, wet bedding, quarrels, sickness, lost animals, broken wheels. The truth is not one mood. It is both. You can stand here in the grey morning and feel pride that everyone lasted until daylight, while also feeling that your back may never forgive the floorboards. Breakfast is quieter than supper. The fire is coaxed from coals, fed carefully, and made to boil snow into water again. Coffee smells stronger than hope and almost as necessary. Cornmeal or flour becomes cakes, mush, or whatever shape tired hands can manage. The food is plain, but the first hot bite arrives like kindness. Steam fogs the air near your face. You eat slowly, watching light spread across the white plain. The storm has not vanished entirely. Clouds still hang low, and wind still moves loose snow across the ground in thin white threads. But the worst has passed. The world is visible. The trail is hidden under snow, yet not gone. People begin discussing whether to move today or wait. The decision depends on animals, weather, ground, distance, and the company's nerves. Some want to press on, others argue for rest. Even progress must sometimes sit down and admit it is tired. You look across the camp. Wagons stand in a rough line, battered but present. Smoke rises from several fires. A child laughs at a dog shaking snow from its coat. Someone wrings water from a cloth. Someone else reties a rope with hands that still remember midnight. The night has become work, and work has become morning. Slowly. The fear drains from the scene. Not completely. It never completely leaves a journey like this. But it loosens. It becomes part of the story you will carry, tucked beside the letter, the song, the taste of smoky cornmeal, the memory of ox breath steaming in lantern light. You have slept, badly but truly. inside an 1852 covered wagon on the Great Plains during a snowstorm. You have learned that sleep can be cramped, damp, interrupted, and still deeply human. And now the pace softens. The camp grows quieter in your mind, even while people move through it. The scrape of the shovel fades to a gentle rhythm. The oxen chew slowly, each breath rising and disappearing. Snow slips from the canvas in soft sighs. The grey morning opens wider, not bright, not warm, but calm enough to rest your thoughts upon. You do not need to walk farther yet. Not in this final moment. You may let the wagon remain still, let the trail wait under its white cover, let the wheels rest in their shallow beds of snow. Around you, the people you travelled with are safe enough for now, wrapped in shawls, holding cups, speaking in low voices that drift like smoke. The storm moves away across the plains, taking its sharpest sounds with it. What remains is a wide hush, a pale sky, and the small sturdy shape of the wagon that carried you through the dark. You breathe in the cold morning air and breathe out slowly. The canvas lifts in a faint breeze. The fire settles. The animals stand calm. The blankets, damp and rumpled, still remember warmth. So let your own body grow heavy now. Let the boards become distant. Let the snow outside soften every edge of the world. The road can wait. The morning can wait. Even history, for once, can lower its voice. You're here, held inside a quiet white plain, with nothing more to do but rest. Sweet dreams.